Right.
So I build the framework and the infrastructure to create this thing and share it with people. But then I also have to get out of the way. This is what the podcast is. You guys got to let go of what you thought it was going to be and step into what it actually is. And what that looks like is us just, like I said, getting out of the way.
Yeah.
Right. We just have to show up and let the thing happen. You know what I've started to understand it as? Because again, I'm reflecting back, right? If I don't look back, I don't put these pieces together. I don't have awareness of this. And I'm only putting these pieces together right now, Josh, because you and I are having this conversation.
Right.
You're lighting things up for me that I can look back and see, because we start Steph and Craig and I get the inspiration. I get the idea. I get the nudge and the push. But then I show up and I'm like, I don't know what to do. You told me to do this thing. I don't know how to do it. I did this other podcast over here. And because I was too afraid to be seen, and because I was too afraid to be like out in public and showing all of these vulnerable things, that podcast stayed really small. At least in my mind, it did, right? I kept it over here kind of in the corner, and we would have these really emotionally vulnerable, hard episodes. And I mean, like I said, there's 380 episodes. It's still up on YouTube. I think it's still up elsewhere too, but you can go back and listen to all of them. And it's like, you know, we were being so raw and vulnerable on the podcast that I was afraid for people to see it. So I didn't let it expand into what it wanted to become. But truthfully, I did, because it became Steph and Craig, right?
Right.
But so I get the inspiration and the nudge to create the show, but then I don't know what to do about it, right? And what I did was, at the time, I was consuming a lot of what was inspiring me to make this leap and to push was Mel Robbins. I don't know if you know who she is. She's got like a number one, she's Mel Robbins podcast. It's an amazing podcast. She's got so many amazing things. She just came out with a new book this year called Let Them, the Let Them Theory. Like, we could do a whole conversation about that one. That's kind of the getting out of the way concept too, where it's like, just let them, right? We get so caught up in all the different things about the relationships and the dynamics and the things that our kids and our wives and our spouses and our friends and our families all doing these different things. And the whole idea is like, let them get out of their shit and just focus on your own path in your own life. So I was really consuming a lot of Mel's podcasts and listening to her and listening to her and listening to her. And she's very inspirational and she's very loving. I mean, like, all of her messaging is like, I see you, I believe in you, and we can do this, right? I love you. Let's go, let's go, let's go. So I used her as the framework to help me build it out initially, because it was like, I didn't have the bandwidth to come up with all the stuff that you have to use, you know, all the things that you have to create for the podcast. So rather than me sitting down and trying to like pull forth all of those things myself, I just thought, what would Mel do? And then I basically did the Steph and Craig version from my perspective of whatever that looked like. So it helped me create the framework for the podcast, and it helped build the infrastructure for us to be able to launch and get going, right? It gave us the little bit of a boost so that we could get the momentum, so that we could get going. Okay, now we're up and we're running, and I'm kind of operating under this. So if you go back and look at some of the early go look at some of the thumbnails of the Steph and Craig show. You can go scroll through, and they look exactly like Mel Robbins thumbnails, because I had never done a lot of stuff on YouTube. YouTube was a social media platform that I hadn't really entered into, because I was so focused on Instagram, and then I was focused on Facebook, and TikTok's like out here wanting my attention, but I'm like, fuck you, TikTok. I don't want to look at you. And so finally, I was in YouTube, which meant I had to learn YouTube. And I don't know what I don't know that language. I don't know what's going on. So I'm like, well, what does Mel do? Fuck, I'll do a thumbnail like Mel does. And along the way, I was creating these thumbnails week after week after week after week, and they were boring as fuck. It was like, I did not enjoy the creative process. And I don't know what happened, other than I just allowed myself, I gave myself permission. I believed in myself is actually what happened. I started to believe that I had the actual ability to create a good thumbnail, because I started to look at the thumbnail not as a graphic that I had to create for YouTube for this new thing, but I started to look at it as a singular, almost like a photograph. So I looked at the thumbnail as a photograph, and how do I want to take this photograph and what do I want in this photograph? And then not only do I look at it as a photograph, but I look at it as a painting, and it's like, oh, the tones and the colors and the lights and the shadows of this painting that I'm creating. And then I zoom out and it's just a thumbnail for the new podcast episode, right? So when I
That's really
started
great.
thinking about things in that way, suddenly my thumbnail started popping, and I'm like, oh, that's a good thumbnail. I'd get done with a thumbnail and be like, baby, get over here. Look at this.
It's
And
art.
she's like, that's a good thumbnail. That's starting to look good. I'm like, I know, right? So I started to believe that I had the capacity to create these things, which meant I had to let go of Mel Robbins. I had to let go of the infrastructure that she helped me build. I had to let go of that system, that, all the different things that had helped me launch the show, which I was so incredibly grateful for. I had to let those things go and embrace what I could actually do and create. So that's kind of my creative process, is allowing it to come through me. And if I don't have the inspiration in the moment, if I'm still clouded with fear and I don't really believe in myself and I don't know what to do, then I will look for the things that are around me. Because oftentimes I have this whole idea that it's like, you think about, you go out hiking, and when you're on the path and you're walking, if you constantly look forward, it's going to take you where you want to go. But what's important is the things that you need to get to where you want to go. All you have to do is look down and they're there. So everything that I need is in front of me. I just have to pause and reflect and look. And that's kind of what Mel Robbins was, because I was listening to Mel Robbins' podcast long before I thought about starting a brand new podcast. But when I paused and I was like, what do I do about this thing? That was like me stopping the hike and pausing and looking like, what's in front of me? Well, I have a really beautiful example of somebody. Mel started her podcast a few years ago, but like within the scope of a year, she, got a top 10 podcast. And I was like, well, I want a top 10 podcast. So I'm going to emulate somebody that has a top 10 podcast. And rather than like, I think this is where people get stuck. I know I got stuck here a lot over the course of my life, is I will look for inspiration, but then not recognize that the inspiration oftentimes is just the foundation and the infrastructure, right? It gave me thumbnails. It kind of gave me a style and a focus. Our original description for the Steph and Craig show, like if you go look at it right now, it's got this big long, like, tune in every week for this, that, and the other, and all of it, like this beautiful, eloquent, truthfully, a lot of it was written by Chat GPT, but I put a little bit of Craig on it. And all of it was inspired by Mel Robbins, because that helped me gain confidence to get the thing going and then eventually step into it. And again, not take over and start thinking that I'm the one, well, now it's mine and I'm doing this thing, but to step into this space and let it become what it wanted to become. And that's the creative process for me, is getting out of the way and just letting it flow through me.
You know what else? Now that you mentioned that about getting out of the way, I do think that I think many of us are here to learn about how to control ego. I think that ego is a big player in how things go. I think the lesson for me has been, to not let my ego make decisions. It's okay to have enough of and I think it should be a different word. Self-love is not ego. I think that ego is the feeling of grandiosity, that I'm better than, I'm bigger than. And I think that part is the part that is the negative energy, the frequency, the bad frequency. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's
You're
just,
describing it good. I like it.
I think that
It makes sense.
thank you. I think that ego has been a large roadblock in many of my ventures. And I justified it in different ways. I was like, no, but because of this, or because this person, or because that reason, I had to do it that way. And that the truth has always been that ego has stopped me from becoming what it is that I was supposed to become earlier. And so again, the universe is patient, and everything that you have that is supposed to be will be. just whenever you're ready. And I think that ego is one of those, it's one of those lessons that for me, I had to uh, look at myself and go, do I just is it just the grandiosity? Do I just want to be bigger than? Is that what this is? Is this why I'm fighting so hard? Is that and obviously we can talk about childhood and there's linkages to that of the why do I want to be? That's a different conversation altogether. But am I trying to be? And once that gets answered honestly, it's like, okay, then that noise for me has settled down. Where it's been like, oh, that's what you are. That's the energy I'm feeling. Okay, why am I feeling that? And then we go down that road. And for me, that has been the venture that this podcast has taken me on, is the why do I react that way when this person does this? Or it's the control thing if you haven't had it as a child. It's the now I want to be in control because I wasn't then.
Yeah.
And that creates that a lack of self-love is so detrimental. I don't think there's enough conversations about the feeling of less than is so detrimental for not just you but anyone around you, that when you love yourself you love others. That is my mantra that I live by, is that when I love myself I love others. And that's why, because ego can grow out of a feeling of lack of. And so I think that that's been a big roadblock for me that I had to learn, was the get out of the way part, is the ego that's like, no, but I want it to be this way. I want it to be this because this is what I want, right? Not what the universe intends for me. This is what I want. And I think that at the end of the day, it's going to be better than what you wanted once you step out of the way. And that's the lesson for me anyway. I did want to ask you though, you did mention about with Ben,
Real quick, Josh.
yeah, go for it.
That's beautiful, dude.
Thank you.
I agree with everything that you said, and it made a lot of sense. And I can relate so much to all of those things based off of my experiences. And I think you're 100% spot on. And I'm really, really happy for you that you've been able to kind of do what you've been able to do, because that's a big hurdle, dude. Getting over that inner critic, that voice, that thing that's fucking stopping you every time you wake up, right? It's as soon as your brain clicks on in the morning, it's there.
Yeah.
You know, it's coming with you when you're pouring your cup of coffee on your way to work, getting dressed, brushing teeth. It's always like, what are you doing, you piece of shit? You're going to be dead. Is that the shirt you're going to wear? Oh, you look pretty fat in that fucking shirt, fatso. Oh, you're going to eat something else? Okay, cool. That's going to be fucking good for you, right?
100%.
It is there with you constantly.
It
And for
doesn't go away.
you, right? And for you to be able to recognize it, identify it, and then choose otherwise, brother, that's a huge thing. I just really want to acknowledge that.
I really appreciate you saying that. It is, first of all, it is a challenge, and it's not something that goes away. It's not a thing of like, oh, now I know you and therefore you're gone. It's a thing. Knowing it is important. Like knowing it by, I guess, by name, for a lack of a better word, is really important. Where it's like, oh, it's you, right? And so then we talk, and I'm like, hey, I don't. This is not what I intend, and I hear you, and I know why you're there. But this is not where I want to go. And that choice, it's pause. It's always pause. The moment that you can, because things go so fast for me in my head, where it's like, I got to get this done, and then we got to do this by this date. There's just this noise. But when I pause, I know the answer. It's there. It's just slow down. Just take a minute, because self-love is patience also. And so I think that in learning that, things have been smoother for me. And again, it doesn't go away. It's not something that I can turn off. It's just something I can acknowledge and then go, I want to go this way. And then that's the way that you should have gone anyway. And so it'll feel right too. And that's an important thing to listen to, is the thing that I'm feeling right now that I want to let go immediately, is this the thing that I feel right releasing like this? And once the answer is no, because it always, it before you know the answer before you ask the question.
Yes.
And so once you ask the question out loud and you say the answer out loud, it's like, oh yeah, okay, I'm going this way. and that's what it's been for me. And so I thank you again. I think that's maybe I don't recognize stuff that I do like that sometimes. And so thank you. That I
I
appreciate.
only see that in you because I do the same thing.
Right? It's difficult, right? So it's nice to have somebody that
Ben
sees.
did it for me the other day on the podcast. We were in this beautiful, like I said, the first episode will be out next week. And I don't know when this one's coming, but you can go watch Brave Men there. It's like episode 13 or something like that it's going to be. And we were in the middle of this beautiful conversation and just really talking through a lot of different things. And what I was talking about was, I was talking about it through the lens of like how hard it was to try to navigate. We were actually having a conversation about friendship, and not just how hard friendship was, but because Ben and I are getting so close together, our families are spending a lot of time together. So our wives are starting to become friends and cultivate a really good friendship. And like I said, all of our kids are adults now, but Ben's got a 10-year-old son and I think their daughter's 7 or 8 years old, and we're spending a lot of time with them. So it's like we did Thanksgiving with them over at his mom's place. She has this beautiful cabin up in the mountains that we got to go to. Like it's beautiful and it's wonderful, but it's countered by all this fear and anxiety because it's hard to navigate relationships together. And it's like Ben and I's one thing, but then we've got Ben and I, and then we've got our wives, and then we've got our families, and then we've got all of these other compounding things. And like, we've got the podcast, and he's opening his gym. Well, not opening, it's open, but he's got his new gym. We've got all of these things in life, and we're kind of involved with all of them together in some capacity, because that's how you support, right? When you're in a
Right.
community with each other. But that's also challenging. I don't have a lot of experience doing that in a healthy way. So we were kind of talking through all of that, and I was just sharing about how hard it has been for me. And he paused, he patterned, interrupted me again, like he's so good at. And he was like, I just really want to acknowledge that, yeah, that's hard. But he's like, I just want you to know that like it's hard. And the thing that whatever he was trying to tell me, what it felt like to me was a moment where somebody had recognized how hard my life has been, because he's seen my life for the last 2 years. And it's been hard, Josh.
Mm.
It's been a hard couple of years for me. And to have him see me in that moment and not just sit with me, but also be like, I see you. I see how hard it is. And I just want to acknowledge that. So it was a really beautiful moment for me. And listening to you talk, like going against, I think that's what going against the grain is we're going against that voice that tells us no. We're going against fear. It's like every turn, fear is like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And courage tells us that we can. And being able to step in those moments and be like, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I think sometimes we need people to help us see those things. That's why connection is so important.
I'm super grateful for you. So thank you. I think that was good for me too. So I appreciate you. I did want to get into, you mentioned the conversation with Ben that you had, that he what's the word, that he kind of he changed the story you were telling yourself about your relationship with males in particular, and that you can have a good relationship with another male. Can I ask you where that comes from? Where is that rooted?
The story that I can or that I can't have good
That you
relationships with
can't.
men. Well, obviously it's childhood. It's a long story, one that in some ways I feel like is mine, but I feel like it was also given to me a lot of ways.
Mm.
I was born into a family where my dad worked a job. He worked for I always try to articulate it and say he's fucking retired now, so I don't know why I can't talk about it. But
Mm.
there was a part of my dad's job that we just didn't really talk about, even though it wasn't like secret. But I think it's because he just didn't talk about his job a lot. And truthfully, I didn't know a lot of what he did. But he was in the Air Force. He did a couple of years in the Air Force. And when he got out of the Air Force, he went and worked at this military base that was out in the middle of nowhere in Utah. There's a couple of military bases out there. It's really funny, actually, because my dad worked at one it's like Stephanie and I grew up in the same valley. And my dad worked at this military base that was over on the north end of the valley and basically took up the entire north end of the Utah because it's where all the jets would fly out to and do all of their testing and training and everything like that. And then Steph's dad worked on the other side of the highway, which was where the other military base was. And so it was kind of funny, but he worked at this military base and he was an MP there. And that meant that he was out of the base for like 2-3 days working. And, he had a room there. He had a space. He lived there for 2 or 3 days while he was working. And then he'd come home for two or 3 days. So we had this very strange relationship where he's gone, he's home, he's gone, he's home, he's gone, he's home. And over the course of my childhood, it became where it was like when my dad was at work was when we got to do everything that we wanted to do. And then when my dad came home was when we had to straighten up and, it would be like my dad would get home at 8:30 in the morning and we would be vacuuming the front room at 8 o'clock to hurry up and get the house clean before dad comes home. And we got to do all these things and we got to run around, and we had to hide so many different things from my dad. Like there was one time my mom backed up the van. We had this big VW van, right? I don't know why I was like, it's a big VW. How do I describe it? It's a fucking van.
Yeah.
So we had this big van. And she backed it up to the house so that my brothers could jump off the roof onto the van, because we had this big pear tree in the front yard and we could climb the pear tree and get from the pear tree to the roof. But my brothers were too afraid to jump off the roof, and they were also too afraid to go back down the tree. So my mom's solution was to back the van up, and they jumped onto the roof of the van. Kids were safe. Everything was great, but there was a dent in the van. And so my mom had to lay on the floor of the van and push the dent out with her feet. And then the whole fear was dad's going to find out about the dent in the van. And I'm sure he did at one point, right? I don't remember. When he did finally find out, I think enough time had passed and it wasn't even that big of a deal that it wasn't a big deal. But that's kind of what my childhood was a lot of hiding things from dad because dad was going to be mad.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my 2 older brothers. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. And although there was a lot of love felt and a lot of loving things, there was also a lot of violence and a lot of abuse and a lot of pain. And what that left me with was just when I say a lack of, I mean, truthfully, zero trust in other people. Because all the people that I thought loved me had plenty of examples why, right? So if I'm running tests all the time, I'm, run tests with this person, I've got 3 loves and then 46 hates. And so, okay, well, that tells me something. And the same thing over here, right? I'm just constantly experiencing these 2 dualities, but in my mind, I'm building up all of these reasons why people don't like me and why people hate me. And so specifically when it comes to men and like male relationships, because my dad was very not around in my life, right? He just really wasn't present. I remember early childhood, I have some real good memories of being young, like 4 or 5 years old, doing yard work with my dad, eating watermelon in the summertime. My dad used to tie a do-rag around his head. That's what he called it. And I remember looking back now what it was. It's all of his old stuff that he had from when he was in the Air Force. So it was a green do-rag that he'd fold up and then tie around his head. And that was, catching the sweat. So I'd get my do-rag out and tie it around my head and go out and do yard work with my dad. And I have all these really cool memories with him. And then at some point they just kind of fade away. And I've been able to look back and see how my dad just kind of faded away. And he became less and less present in our life or in my life. And, the days that he was home from work, he didn't really interact with us a lot. He was really irritable and upset and angry. And I also recognize that that's my perception of what's going on, right? But that's the way kids work, right? We tend to know and understand what's going on in our environment around us, even though nobody tells us. I think in some ways it's because we can connect and feel that emotional connection with everybody. So when my parents got divorced, I was 14. my oldest brother was already out of the house in college, or was about to be out of the house in college. And then Brian, my second brother, was a senior in high school, and I was just starting high school. I was a freshman. And after that, my dad was like really gone. And we would only see him periodically. He'd swing by on his way home from work and pick us up, and we'd go see a movie and go out to lunch, and then he would drop us off at the house. But there was no shared custody. I didn't even know where my dad lived. He was just gone. And over the course of that childhood, and again, this has come through my ability to like look back and process things. I didn't know any of this at the time. I didn't even know this like 5-10 years ago. Truthfully, I'm putting a lot of these pieces together as we're talking right now, Josh.
Yeah, that's.
But
Yeah.
I look back and I recognize that I took what is the natural instinct of a human. It's not just a boy, but the natural instinct of a human to, have a loving, connected relationship with their father. And I just transplanted that onto my older brother. And then when my older brother left, and it's not even when he left, because I still had that bond and connection with him where I was projecting my father onto him and trying to have his love and acceptance. It was like, please just see me, please just validate me, please just tell me that you love me. And growing up, that looked a lot of like weird ways, because I really idolized my older brother. And there would be times where I remember there was one time he had this necklace, and this was like back in the day where we had shopping malls, and there was a mall in the store that was called like beach graffiti or something like that. It was this cool, I mean, you could buy anything there. They had like cool tie-dye stuff. They had, trinkets. They had all sorts of different things in this shop. And he bought this necklace that was a yin yang symbol. And it was also like a mood ring type thing. So whatever they make those out of, it was the same material. So it would change colors depending upon what your mood was, right? And I thought that was the coolest fucking thing. And I was like, I just want to touch it. I just want to have it. Can I please, like, Adam, can I please wear it today at school? Just let me wear it once, please, right? And he's like, I'll let you wear it if you let me hit you in the stomach as hard as I can. And I'm all, fucking done. And that's all wait a minute, you're going to beat me? That's all I got to do? Fucking done. So I remember standing there, and I'm in middle school, right? So I'm probably like 6th grade or something like that. And I stand there and I just, clench my abs as hard as I can. And he just punches me as hard as he can in the stomach. And both of us are just like, are you okay? And I'm like, I'm okay. And he's like, you can wear the necklace. And I'm like, I wear the necklace that day. So I was so excited because I got to wear the fucking necklace. And I look back on that memory now, and I can see it from so many different angles and so many different perspectives. But the one perspective that took me the longest to see was the little boy that idolized his dad. And then in order for that little boy to get love from his dad, he had to get punched in the stomach as hard as he possibly could. Mm. And that is the perspective that I did not see for a really, really, really long time. I didn't look at my childhood through that lens and through that perspective up until about 4 years ago. And when I started, and that's the other thing that I think is really important, especially when it comes to like inner child healing is my jam. It's what I'm all about. I'm all about my little 5-year-old little boy inside of me, right? I'm all about all of these little, like that's a perfect story to highlight. There's how old was I? 6th grade? I don't know what that is. Like 12-year-old kid right there, right? Who just really, the necklace didn't have anything to do with it. It was just, I thought my brother was so cool. And this was a cool thing that he had, right? And cool is really just, I idolize him, which means I'm in love with him. Like, I just think he's the coolest thing ever. And I just want some component of that love. I want some connection to him. Truthfully, there's a part of me that thinks I probably just wanted to wear the necklace so that I felt connected to Adam as I was moving around my day, because I would have some part of him that would make me feel strong like he did, right? It would make me feel like my big brother so I could move through the day with this necklace on. And there's so many moments in my life like that I see through a different perspective and through a different lens now. And it doesn't change the experience. Like, it's not like suddenly, that situation with the necklace is, it's funny. I can see it as the funny thing that it is. I can joke about it with my brother. I can see it from all of these kind of different perspectives. I can see how he's also operating without a father. I can see how he's also moving through life with no, he's figuring things out on his own, right? I can see how physical violence was interwoven into our family unit. I can see all of these kind of different layers and components of it. And each individual one of those perspectives that I have around this one singular situation, in my mind, all of them are real and valid because they're an aspect of that situation. And so when I'm looking back over the course of my childhood, I can definitely say that I had a good childhood in a lot of ways. And I can also say that I had a nightmarish childhood in a lot of ways that were incredibly like pushing me to I have a long list of ways that I've hurt myself since I was a child. I have burn marks still on my skin, not from somebody putting cigarettes out on me, but from me burning myself.
Hmm.
I have a lot of things that I did to hurt myself because that's the worth that I was taught. And I think a lot of times when people try to go back and process things from their childhood, everybody looks at them initially through that lens. Not everybody. There's definitely people that can look at their childhoods through different lenses, of course, but a lot of people struggle with looking at it from this other side where it's like, I was abused, or, it wasn't a safe home, or I didn't, all of the, placing blame on my older brother, or placing blame on my mom, or placing blame on my dad. I went through all of these different moments and times in my life where I would look to somebody else to blame, but in some ways I was looking to somebody else so that I didn't have to feel what I was feeling. It was like this hurt inside of me I was trying to take out and place onto somebody else because it was too much for me to actually sit with myself and feel myself. And along the way, what I've learned is that I get the opportunity to sit with those parts of me that were hurt and afraid whenever they come up. So I have a fun memory about a necklace. It's this awesome thing with my brother. And I can sit with the part of me that was so excited to get to wear the necklace, the part of me that didn't care that he got punched in the stomach, the part of me that was like, I'm fucking strong. Like, go ahead and punch me and kick me as hard as you want. It's not going to hurt me. Like, there was nothing my brothers could do to me to hurt me, right? Because I had such a shield around myself. And the way that I thought I was protecting myself was by being physically strong. But that physical strength that I was demonstrating externally was truthfully just the outer shell that I had placed around the little emotional part of me that was really hurt and afraid. So I've had to learn over the years that that thing that I placed around me that's like, oh, I'm going to be big and strong, it did a beautiful job. Like like if I look at it as like armor and stuff that I wore, like it is the best armor that I could have ever imagined. Like if it was like, the war's over and he's hanging his armor on the wall, like I would hang that armor up. I would be like, that kept me safe for 40 years. Look at that fucking armor.
Yeah.
It's got dents, it's got scratches, it's got scars, it's got marks, it's got everything on it, right? Blood, sweat, tears. That armor kept me safe. And I'm really, really grateful for it. And there was so many different things that went into like creating that armor, right? Different programs, different stories. That experience with my brother made my stomach stronger. I would need that strength in my stomach much later on when my life was actually at threat, right? When I was actually in moments where I had to decide, do I go left or right here? There were times when I was a police officer where I had to really listen to that voice. So we were talking earlier about that still small voice, that thing that just, hey, dude, go right. I had to get real, real good at being able to like be up here doing cop work and moving around and, doing stuff. But then at the same time, still be able to listen to that voice. There was one time where I pulled this guy over. He got called in for drunk driving, which happens all the time, right? People are like, that guy's driving drunk. And the majority of the time, actually, probably the majority of the time, they are driving drunk. But a lot of times we kind of blow it off as police officers because you got a lot to do, right? And somebody that calls in a drunk driver, that might just be somebody that was pissed off that somebody cut him off. And that also, too, is my jadedness from being a police officer, because that's how police officers saw a lot of different things. But this time I was in the area, so I was able to locate the guy. And I start following him long enough to identify, okay, yeah, this guy's totally drunk. He's all over the place. And as soon as I turn on the lights to pull him over, he doesn't stop. And so suddenly it becomes, there's a spot in a traffic stop where you identify you want to stop a vehicle, and then I have to like, sometimes you don't have the luxury of doing this, but ideally okay, I'm pulling that car over, and then I kind of pick and choose the space that I want to do it in. So I'm going to pull them over on the stretch of road where it's safe for me as the officer to interact and do the traffic stop. But you don't always get to choose sometimes, because obviously the person driving the vehicle is also deciding where they're going to pull over.
Mm.
So you have to be able to gauge, like I turn my lights on, the guy doesn't immediately pull over or indicate that he's pulling over in any way. He's continuing to go. And I'm like, is he running from me, or has he just not seen me yet? So there's this weird limbo period where you have to decide, okay, are we in a 1080, which is a chase, or is this guy just got his music up really loud and hasn't seen me behind him yet? But this guy was drunk, and it was real clear to me that we crossed over the window of he's now evading, right? He's trying to get away from me, but he's too drunk to do it well. So it's not really a good chase, because it's just like, okay, I'm following this guy and it's late, so there's not like any traffic on the road. And it wasn't long at all before he just kind of stopped in the middle of the road. And the entire time for that traffic stop, there was something. The voice was talking to me the whole time. My stomach was like on fire the whole time, right? I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know why. That sensation that we've been referring to was something that I had to build a really close relationship with as a police officer, because I can't fire that thing up and expect it to operate like at its highest level for the entire 12-hour shift. I have to be able to navigate that 12-hour shift, but at the same time, recognize when my intuition goes danger, 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 danger. And if I'm not tuned in enough to hear the danger, 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 I might miss it, which means I might get hurt or somebody else might get hurt. And so when this traffic stop happened, as I got out and I was starting to walk up to the car, because enough had happened on the traffic stop that I should have pulled him out at gunpoint, which meant it should have been me positioned back at my vehicle, giving him commands to exit the vehicle, right? Because it was essentially a chase at this point, and he was evading, and I could clearly tell that he at least was driving the vehicle intoxicated, at least, right? I don't know what he's under the influence of. It could be anything. There's times where people would get called in for drunk driving and they're having a diabetic thing, right? So I don't know what's going on, but the thing in my belly is like, you need all faculties present right now. And for whatever reason, and I don't know why, Josh, other than I just trusted it, I didn't do the whole, because there's a whole thing that comes into play when you start pulling people out at gunpoint, right?
Yeah.
I got to position my vehicle a certain way. It's like, you're going into a different direction, right? Instead of going left, I'm going right, and we're pulling this guy out at gunpoint, and we're now going down that rabbit hole. So I don't know why, but I didn't do that. I just approached it like a regular traffic stop, even though we were in the middle of the road. So I just walked up on him like I was walking up on the guy that just accidentally ran a stoplight. And as I walked up to him, he was sitting in his truck and he was holding onto the wheel, but he wasn't holding on to the wheel like sometimes people would place their hands on their wheel like they just got pulled over. So they're trying to, I'm okay, officer. Look, here's my hands.
Yeah.
This guy was holding on to that wheel with dear life. He was holding on to that wheel so fucking tight. And as I walked up to him, I just knew I had to talk to him really calm. And so I just treated it like a regular traffic stop. And I was like, hey, guy, what's going on? Where are you headed tonight? And he wouldn't talk. He was just kind of like holding on to his will. And the next thing he started, like, I don't even know if he articulated it, but he was like, shoot me, shoot me, shoot me. You got to kill me, kill me. And then he like indicated, he didn't move his hands. He kept his hands tight on the wheel, but he was like, I have a gun right there in the door. Like he told me that he had a gun in the door next to him. And my response to him, I was like, that's cool. I got a gun right here too, dude. I got the one on my hip. You got the one right there. Let's just leave him there and keep talking. And so I just continued to have a conversation with him. And it was one of those situations where I don't know what happened to that guy. I don't know what was going on in his life, but he was having the worst fucking night of his life. And the way that he was going to fix it was he was going to go out and he was probably going to do something. And when we intervened and when we interrupted him, then he was like, cool, I don't have to do this now. Somebody else is going to take care of this for me. And instead, he just went to jail for drunk driving. You know, I safely got him out. We got him in handcuffs. I didn't, sometimes, like, you know, drunk driving, you have to do like drunk driving, you know, sobriety tests and everything like that. I didn't do any of that stuff. I was just like, yeah, dude, no worries. Put you in handcuffs, get you in the back of the car. And afterwards, I'm processing it. And he did. He had a handgun right in the, you know, side pouch of his truck down there. And it was so interesting because had I not been able to not just connect to, but also trust that thing inside of me that says, don't pull this guy out at gunpoint. Don't do that. Just go up and talk to him. Just treat it like a regular traffic stop. Right? Had I not done that, then who knows? Obviously, we can all imagine what could have happened. We've all seen plenty of situations, right? And this isn't anything about what's going on or what has gone on in law enforcement and all those kind of things. This is just the experience that I had. But that moment gave me, again, it's like I learned to trust that voice, because that was one of countless moments as a police officer where I chose to go this way instead of that way. And every time I went this way, nobody died.
That's
right?
important.
Yeah. Like every time I went that way, nobody died. There was another time where there was this guy who had like, is this like, are we cool, dude? Like, I'm in my head. I got my thing popping up.
Please, just go, please. I'm here as long as you are.
I had this other one. The guy gets called in early in the morning, and we had just switched shifts. And so you're coming on in the morning, and, you know, I don't want to do anything. It's 5 o'clock in the morning. I just got out of bed. I want to hang out at the police department and drink some coffee and bullshit. And maybe we'll roll out and go do something around 7 o'clock, whatever. Right. But this guy got called in for, looked like he was going through vehicles and stuff like that. So some guy out walking around a neighborhood, checking cars for unlocked doors so that he can go through them and steal stuff, which is super common. That was a regular call that we would get all the time as well, because obviously people are concerned about their stuff, right? But the majority of the time you'd show up and you would never find the person, or you'd find the person and they would be out for their morning walk with like their high visibility vest on. And you're like, why did this person get called in, right? People just never know what's going on. But for whatever reason, I'm like, fuck. Okay, I guess I'll go look at this. So I leave and I go out and I find the guy, matches the description of me. He's walking on the side of the road, and I pull up behind him and I get out and I start talking to him. And he's out in front of my vehicle, maybe 10 feet. And, you know, I've got my headlights on. I'm not like, I don't have overheads on. I might have had like my spotlight turned on him, but nothing major. And Sergeant pulls up, so he's with me, and I'm just hanging back at my vehicle talking to this guy at this point, because I still haven't identified him as anything other than somebody walking on the street who matches the description of somebody, right? So I have to kind of do a little bit of an investigation before I'm like, hey, dude, don't move. What are you doing? Because obviously people have rights to walk around and do what they want to do.
Yeah.
And as I'm talking to him, he's displaying every indication that he's up to no good. His body language is very much like, I don't want you to be here talking to me right now, and this is danger for me.
Yeah.
And what I noticed was he started turning his body away from me. So him and I there was about 10 feet from us, right? And we were kind of talking and talking and talking, and then he started to kind of turn his body away from me at an angle. And there was something in the way that he did that again, belly goes up. Belly's like, you got to act right now. And the thought that came to my head was, do I pull out and go gun on him, or do I move towards him? And I don't even know why, dude, but I just moved towards him. And at the same instant that all of this happened, he pulls a gun out of his waistband and he throws it over the fence next to him, just as I'm tackling him to the ground. And tackling him, get him cuffed up, get him in the car. We recover the gun, which was stolen. He had a bunch of stolen property in his backpack, all these kind of different things. But it was one moment in time where it was like, I had to trust. I didn't question. I didn't, because there were times when I pull out my gun. I wasn't like, one of the things as a new officer that I learned was like, when I was a new cop, I would, because you're learning. And so you're following the patrol out, you're following everybody around doing what they're doing. So whatever somebody does, I do, because I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. So I'm following around all these training officers and they're talking to people. So I'm talking to people. They're arresting people. So I'm arresting people. I'm trying to do all these different things. And then you learn along the way. And at some point I learned that I decided when I pulled my gun out, because I kept waiting for like, okay, in this situation, this is where we
The
pull our
cue.
gun out, right?
Yeah.
Every time you go to this type of call, you're going to pull your gun out and do this type of thing, right? The reality is I was the decider of that because that is the thing that I use to keep myself safe. So if I don't feel safe, then I'm going to pull that thing out. That sounded terrible. But
I get what you're saying. Go
right.
for it.
So there were plenty of situations where I never hesitated to pull my gun out after I had that awareness. Prior to that awareness, I thought I would get in trouble. I thought I would be in violation of some policy or something like that, right? But after I had the awareness of like, oh, wait, this is up to me, cool. So I never hesitated to pull my gun out when I needed it or when I felt like I needed it. But what was really interesting is every time where there was a situation where I don't even want to say that I should have pulled my gun out because I don't think that's the case. I think I definitely did the thing that I should have done. But every time where there was a decision between do I pull my gun out or do I move towards the person, I chose to move towards the person. And I am so grateful for that because there are so many things that I'm grateful that I did not have to experience as a police officer. It gave me more than enough like grist for the mill. I got more than enough experiences to help me on my healing journey as a police officer. I'm really glad that I never had to shoot anybody.
Wow. Well, first of all, that's a lot to have to deal with. So the fact that I'm glad you're okay. I'm glad that you came out of that in one piece. But
I'm glad
man,
those men are okay. Like, I'm
yeah,
so glad that drunk guy got to eventually sober up and go home. I'm so glad that happened. And I'm glad I'm okay too.
yeah. I think that's and in more ways than one, not just physically. Of course, there's always things that we're gonna have left over to process, and I'm sure you had. But just the fact that you're doing what you're doing now, and not something else that harming yourself, and because that's always a possibility. But I'm glad you're okay. Before I ask you,
I did that for about 10 years. I harmed myself
sure.
for about a decade.
That sure, but you're on a different path now, and I think
For
that's
sure.
worth mentioning. And before I ask you this question, I have to make a terrible joke, and
Let's hear it.
it's been a bug that since I heard you talk about it, I have to say. There's this thing that I saw a long time ago, a comment somewhere on a cop video, where somebody said, if the police officer says vehicle, you're going to jail. I don't know if that's like a cop experience thing. Like the more seasoned they are, like I don't know what it is, but if somebody put
I
on
can
there,
tell you what it is, or at least what I think it is, right?
what's that?
Because there's this dynamic as a police officer where you have to go out and interact with the society, with the public, all those kind of different things, right? And you have to be able to, like, truthfully, one of the biggest things that I learned from being a police officer was the ability to communicate. I had to become really, 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 really good at communicating. And as a police officer, you're also documenting everything. So every interaction that you have, I'm sure departments are different all across the country and all across the world, but in our department, it was a report for every interaction. So there's a log essentially of what's taking place. And over time, you accumulate this massive amount of data that is built into a system. So when I pull over John Doe, I can see John Doe has had this many interactions with police officers or no real interactions with police officers. So it's a way for police officers to gather and collect information about people to help all sorts of different things, right? And again, this isn't I see police work and I see the way that police do things in this country very, 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 very differently than I did when I was a police officer. So this isn't me commenting on anything like that. It's just part of being a police officer is writing reports, and those reports have to be written like as if you were you know, I mean, they're written so weird, dude. They're the way that you have to articulate. On January 21st at 10:05 a.m., I responded to 305 South Aspen Street in regards to a noise complaint by an anonymous caller. Upon arrival, I observed one vehicle that was moving at a high rate of, it's bananas how you have to articulate stuff. So you
Yeah.
have to learn how to communicate in that way so that you can document it,
The
because
lingo.
everything's got to go to court at some point. So we're writing everything with the understanding that it might be in front of might be held up in front of society at some point to look at. So you have to articulate things very, very clearly. So that's why vehicle rather than like car. Because I
Yeah.
wouldn't
No.
write in the report, I pulled over a car,
Yeah.
right? I pulled over a vehicle.
I think it's the pronunciation more so. It's because when I say vehicle, but it's vehicle. That's
Uh-huh.
the actual enunciation or how you're supposed to pronounce it, and at least how you're supposed to articulate it if you're saying it by the book. And so I just saw that a long time ago. But anyway, I just needed to get that out of my head because it wouldn't leave me alone. So I want to know what is the if there was a takeaway that you got from why were you a police officer, do you think? What led you down that rabbit hole of wanting to do that?
I think there's a lot of reasons why. That's the other thing that I've learned over the years is that I would like things to be simple. I would like there to always be one reason, right?
Mm,
And there's one reason why I'm mad. There's one reason why I'm happy. There's one
mm,
reason why I'm sad. It makes things a lot easier because you can control your environment much easier if there's just one thing you have to deal with, right? But the truth is, I think there was a lot of reasons why I was a police officer. On the surface level, I was looking for a job. At the time that I got the job, I was working at a magnesium plant, driving around in an old minivan, delivering like screws and wrenches and pieces of metal and stuff like that around the different parts of the plant. So I worked in the shop warehouse where, you'd order a piece of 2x4 or something like that, and then some guy would show up and deliver it to you on the other side of the plant. I was doing that, and it paid really well, but it was boring as fuck, and it didn't really do much for me, right? And I was trying to figure out what was I going to do with my life? What was going to be my career? Up at that point, I was in my mid 20s, maybe late 20s, and I was looking for my purpose in life. I was looking for my career because I had waited tables, I had delivered pizzas, I was a mailman. I had all of these random jobs in my 20s because I was also a stay-at-home dad. So when I was first married, I had two kids and I stayed home with them for like the first 5, 6 years, and then eventually started working more full-time jobs once they went to school. My first wife had a really good job at the post office. But anyways, I was looking for a career, and I don't remember how I found it. I don't remember it was earlier on in history. So it's not like I was scrolling through anything. I had
mm.
to have found some classified or saw something online, at some point. And Salt Lake County Jail was hiring for corrections officers. And so I was like, that's a job. They've got their little ad there that says benefits, that says 40,000 a year, that says paid training, that says everything that I'm looking for in order to support my family. And my dad was a police officer in the military, and then my grandfather was a LA County sheriff's officer. He ended up retiring in that position, so he did his whole career in law enforcement in LA. And I got to have beautiful conversations with him, and he was an adult and I was a police officer, and we got to connect differently. And like, he was there during Watts riots. He was there during like the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think he retired in the 80s. So he did his 20 years during a real tumultuous time in LA. So it was really cool to hear his experiences. But he also was he lived in California and we lived in Utah. So I
Mm.
got to see my grandpa a lot, but I never had any relationship with him as a police officer because he was already retired and living the sweet life in California. So I couldn't necessarily say that I had a lot of influence in that way where I was like born into a cop family and I knew that that was like what I was going to do. But in some ways, I think a lot of things prepared me for it. And I got the job at the jail as a corrections officer, went through their training, and my whole plan with that thing, because I didn't want to work at a jail. I had no idea what a jail was, other than I think what a lot of people think, right? Yeah, jail is where they arrest and take people. But I had no idea what a jail was. And when I started working there, it was like a 3-month training academy that you had to go through. So it was Monday through Friday, full time. You're paid, you're hired, you're going through training. But we had this long training process. And I don't even remember if it was week 1 or first month or something like that. But there was the day that we were already in training and we were doing we're corrections office, trainees, and we were running around in our t-shirts with our names on our back, and we're out there marching, we're out there learning all these different things. And they took us over to the jail for the first time. And that was my first experience actually physically inside of a jail, including the jail that I was about to work in. And Salt Lake County Jail, I'm sure it's still the same size because I don't think they've expanded it, but it's like 2,000 beds. It's this really big facility in the middle of the valley. And all the agencies in the valley, it's not like you might have a small agency that's got holding cells or something like that where they can put people, but it was the jail for the entire Salt Lake Valley. So it's a big facility. And the housing units that they had inside of that jail, when they built the jail, they had an old jail that was like in downtown Salt Lake, and they used to refer to it all the time. There was a bunch of old timers that worked at the old jail, and they were just like crusty assholes. And it was like the badge of honor if you came from the fucking old jail. And they looked at everybody else like a bunch of fucking losers. And oh yeah, you don't know anything because we came from the old jail. In the old jail, we had to fight for our lives every fucking day, right? It's the whole thing of like we had to walk uphill both ways in snow, right? Yeah. Same fucking thing with those guys.
Yeah.
And when I finally walked into the jail, they take us into a housing unit. And they redesigned the jail with the new style of corrections, right? Which was direct supervision. And so in my mind, I thought the jail was a jail cell. I thought it was like Shawshank Redemption. I thought it was like The Green Mile. I thought it was like every other movie that I had ever seen. And I based a lot of my reality off of what I saw in movies. So when I show up there, I'm expecting I'm walking into The Green Mile in some capacity. But direct supervision is 100% different. So you walk into this massive empty room. It's this huge kind of like space. And in the middle of it, you have the officer's desk, and it's just up on a raised platform. It's not encapsulated in anything. So there's no glass walls or anything. It's a couple of steps up, and it's just a cement platform, and you've got your control board, and you've got your computer, and you've got your telephone, but there's nothing protecting you because it's direct supervision. And there's 64 inmates in this unit. So there's 32, I can't remember, there's 16 cells on the bottom and 16 cells on top. So it's a 2-tiered housing unit, and inside each cell is 2 prisoners. So altogether, one housing unit holds 64 prisoners. And on your 8-hour shift, you show up, you walk in, switch out. Hey, how was your shift? Anything to pass over? Great. Have a good day. I'm on duty. I'm ready to go to work. I open up the doors in the morning, and all 64 of those prisoners come out into the housing unit, and they get to move around. They get to go to the showers. They get to watch TV. They get to get on the phones. They get to go out in the rec yard. But I'm directly interacting and walking around and hanging out with those 64 guys. I didn't fucking know that. And at the very beginning of my career as a corrections officer, they take us over there and they take us into a housing unit. And I'm like, all by myself. That's the other thing, is it's one officer in the housing unit by themselves. And I'm like, I'm going to do this with 64 criminals. I'm dead. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to die. And so obviously training prepares you for all of these kind of different things. And the concept and idea behind direct supervision is it's in some ways it's safer for inmates because the officer is more connected and more involved and is witnessing and seeing things, as opposed to the one inmate down in the far corner of the end of the jail that nobody ever checked on, who killed himself or did something terrible or something like that, right? That's the idea behind direct supervision. It's a safer environment for everybody involved. But that also meant that you have to really acknowledge, because 90% of the people that were in jail, right? Jail is different than a prison. Prison, you've been sentenced and you're doing, 5 years in prison or something like that. Jail, you're either waiting to go to prison or you're waiting to go to court, or maybe you got 90 days in jail. So you're getting a smorgasbord of all sorts of different people. And depending upon, they had minimum, maximum, no, minimum, medium, and max. So they had 3 different housing units. So when you're working some of the lower security housing units, you're dealing with all 64 prisoners, as opposed to like supermax, where you have 2 officers in the unit and you're only letting out, sometimes there were some units where you would only let out 1 prisoner at a time. And before they came out of the cell, they were fully belly chained and handcuffed. So there were some people, for obvious reasons, that were high risk, right? So there was a huge experience, like a massive learning curve for me in that moment, to recognize, okay, this is way different than I thought it was. And part of me was really excited. Part of me was really like the challenge of it, the excitement of it, right? I get the opportunity to do this cool thing. But I always knew in the back of my mind, I knew that I wasn't a jailer. I wasn't in law enforcement to be a corrections officer. I was in law enforcement to be a cop.
Mhm.
And so my time at the jail was going to be a temporary thing. And then I was going to get out to the road, which is a very normal progression for a lot of guys, because depending upon agencies and all that kind of stuff, not everybody just gets picked up and hired by the police department. A lot of times you'll have different roles in law enforcement until you end up in a certain place. So I was aiming to be a police officer, but my path started as this corrections officer. And I did just under 2 years in the jail. And by the time I quit and went out to the road and got hired on as a police officer, I was miserable. Like
Mm.
that 2 years inside of the jail was horrible. And it's not because it was so full of violence. I never got hurt. Yeah, there were plenty of times where we had to fight people and wrestle people and spray people with OC and
Mm.
a lot of different things. And even though you're the single guy in the unit, you've got, they called them rovers, but you've got backup, and they're just out in the hallway bullshitting in the break room. But they still have to come through a couple of different doorways, right? There's a pause, and then the door opens, and then another pause. There's all these sally ports and security checks. So even if something did happen, you've got backup 2 minutes away at the, latest. Most of the time they were like immediate.
Mm.
And that was very different of an experience than when I was on the road as a police officer. But the knowingness that backup was just hanging out in the break room, I think was a benefit, because I was able to be more relaxed in that environment with all those prisoners. And I really started to listen to them. And what I found was that the vast majority of them were normal people, normal, regular, everyday people that made poor decisions and had a moment in life where they screwed up, right? It's the guy that drove drunk that I pulled over one night. They're just normal people who fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And they were stuck in this process and stuck in this system. And so many of them were addicted. And I would see people come in completely, at the deepest part of their addiction, and 3 months in jail, they get clean and they're a completely different person. It's like you see the person that's walking around talking to themselves, and they're crazy and they're violent and they're aggressive. And then you see that person 3 months later and they're having a normal conversation with you and interacting with you. And I start to understand what's at play with all of it. And I start to recognize that I'm standing on this side of that jail cell, and there's a version of me that's standing on the other side of the jail cell. So I really started to have a lot of compassion for all these people that I was working with, truthfully. I mean, that's kind of the way that I think about it too, where I'm working with officers, but the reality is I don't get to spend my 8-hour shift with officers unless once a week you might get the rover gig, because it's a rotating gig where you get to relax and you got to go give people breaks and haul in lunch carts. But that's not a permanent gig. We just rotate through that each shift. So you might get rover once a week, right? Or if your sergeant's, special, if you're the pet, then you might get to rove a lot. And so I did a lot of time with these prisoners, and it felt like an opportunity for me. Looking back at it, I know what it was. It was my opportunity to really open up and have compassion, and that compassion for people, because there was one night, dude, I was working like Supermax, and it wasn't like super max. There was maximum security, but then there was another unit inside of that maximum security unit. But this was a Supermax where like 2 or 3 people would come out at a time, or 4 guys. I can't remember the exact number. And you had to do a watch tour. So you'd get up from your desk, and there were 3 or 4 buttons spread out around the housing unit. So I'd go over to the wall and scan my little pass card, which would then activate the system. And the way that I reset the system is I have to go push the buttons. So I have to do a watch tour is what they call it. And I have to do a watch tour every hour. And that system is built in there to keep officers safe. So that if an officer doesn't do a watch tour, then it notifies, they don't call it dispatch. Anyways, it notifies control. That's what they call it. And control checks on you. Hey, you didn't do a watch tour. Go do your watch tour. And 99% of the time, officer just forgot to do his watch tour and he gets up and goes and does it. But that system's in place for that one time that the officer actually is hurt or needs help or maybe even worse, right? So I'm up doing my watch tour and I would build a relationship with these prisoners because we were in it together, right? If they wanted something, they got to come through me. And if I want something, I got to go through them. I can't stand there and be like, go back to your cell, right? I mean, I could, right? And a lot of officers did, but in my mind, I wasn't interested in fighting anybody. I know what happens when you fight. I used to fight, like I did MMA. I fought in the cage. I have knowledge of violence and I'm not interested. I'm always going to choose the path of least resistance, and violence is not the least resistance. So I'm trying to figure out how to interact with these people, not in the way that is crossing boundaries and violating policies. And I'm not giving them things on this side. There's a lot of that kind of stuff that goes on in correctional facilities because it's a way of surviving. Officers feel like they're in danger, so they befriend the prisoner in a subconscious way because otherwise they're not going to survive that environment. So I get it, but I wasn't going to do that. But I also wasn't going to be like this fucking hard ass, right? Because I wasn't interested in fighting people. So I had to kind of walk this fine line between being a real hard ass. Like there were a lot of prisoners that didn't like it when I worked a housing unit because they couldn't get away with stuff.
Right.
But there was one night I was walking around and I'm talking to this guy and I realized in the moment, because I remember I'm like 25, 26 maybe. He's real close to the same age that I am, except he had lived a completely different life. And the only reason I know that is because I'm literally standing there on the other side of his jail cell, just listening to him. And he's talking about when he was a kid and he was like 8 or 9 years old and he's playing poker with the guys and they're playing Russian roulette and he sees somebody kill himself. So as a child playing poker with the guys, which also meant drugs, alcohol, all sorts of different things, he witnesses somebody shoot himself in the head. And he's telling me this story and letting me know that that was a real catalyst moment for him. And that was a moment for him where he went down the path of gangs and violence and everything else. Because this guy was full tatted out. I mean, we had all the information about like all the different gangs and all their tattoos and all the different I mean, there's this whole culture of not just crime and gangs and jail and everything like that you kind of have to learn, but he was enmeshed in it. He was somebody who'd been in and out of the correctional, system since he was a child. And I was sitting there listening to him talk about it. And I was like, I can't even imagine. I mean, I was thinking about what I was doing when I was 8 years old, like riding bikes and getting scuffed knees and playing baseball. And I'm like, I can't even imagine what that would have been like. But to sit there and have that moment, and it was like, it was night. It was just before I got off shift. So it was like real quiet. And it was up in the corner of the housing unit. And I was standing right by the door because a lot of them aren't going to talk about things around other people for obvious reasons, right? Because they too are trying to feel safe and be safe inside of there. So it was this real intimate interaction with this guy. I don't remember his name or anything, but it just really gave me a lot of humanity. Like it just was this huge gift of seeing this human on the other side of the wall, right? Not a criminal, not a gang member, not the Sereno's tattoo, not the story. I could pull up his record and see what he was in. I knew what he was there for. He was on trial for murder. Like he was there because he was involved in a bunch of shit and he was waiting to go to prison and he knew he was going to go to fucking prison. He wasn't worried about prison because he'd been to fucking prison. Like that was his life.
Yeah.
He was completely institutionalized and lived in and out of correctional facilities his whole life. So he had that experience of life. And it was this moment where two guys came together and I just listened to him. And I was like, wow, it was a real opportunity and a real gift. And there was a part of me in the moment that knew it. Like I knew that there was something significant about that moment. And one of the things that was significant about that moment was just not only was I getting the opportunity to see him, but I think he was getting the opportunity to be seen. And he was getting an opportunity to share some of the things that he was struggling with. Maybe he had been thinking about that night as a kid, thinking about his fucking life, thinking about how did he end up here in this moment, right? And he didn't have anybody to talk about. And then here comes Salazar doing his watch tour. And they used to ask for, hey, I need a roll of toilet paper, or I need this, or so I don't remember exactly, but he probably did something like that to grab my attention. And then we just started bullshitting. And then after like 5 minutes, he gets into that conversation. I'm just like, I couldn't believe it. But that changed how I was a police officer on the road, because I would show up on these calls and I would interact with these people and I would do all of these kind of things as a police officer. And because I had in that conversation with that one guy, I had a bunch of those conversations with other prisoners, right? Like I said, I was there for just under 2 years, and I did the majority of my time in housing. And that meant that I was day in and day out interacting with guys like this. And when I went out onto the road, it gave me way more compassion for everybody, because it's just a bad day. Like that's the thing that really sucks, is cops get to see everybody on their shittiest days.
Right.
I'm not showing up when you're having a birthday party and everything's going great and we just want to give you a piece of cake, officer, and tell you that we're all happy and we love you and everybody's happy and this is great, right? I mean, some good things happen like that, but the majority of the time I'm seeing everybody at their worst. I'm seeing everybody at the moment when shit has literally hit the fan.
Yeah.
And it was important for me to have those interactions and experiences with all of those men and women. I did, there was obviously a huge facility, so we worked both units, and that was what shaped and molded a lot of how I interacted with people on the road. And it also gave me, that's the other thing that I don't think I mentioned, and I think it's probably obvious when you hear it, and maybe people already know, but I didn't know that either. That first day when I walked into that housing unit, one of the things that I didn't realize is becoming a correctional officer did not mean that I got a gun, because the guy that's sitting inside the housing unit, he doesn't have a gun. They're not going to give me a gun inside of a room with 32 criminals, or I shouldn't say criminals, 32 people, that were charged with something. So there wasn't a gun. I was there by myself. I had a little can of OC. That was the thing that I was going to protect myself. OC is like mace, right? It's so I had to rely upon the ability to communicate and connect with people in order to keep myself safe and to keep other people safe. And all of that repetition and that work inside of the jail, the close interaction with people, the ability to observe and see firsthand body language. I remember I came into a unit once and we exchanged keys, and the day shift officer leaves and I get everything ready to go and I unlock the doors. And normally you unlock the doors and it's kind of like this. Everybody takes their time getting out. Maybe some guy runs over to the shower because he's been waiting to get in the shower and he wants his favorite shower before anybody gets there. But this morning I pop the doors and 8 guys come out and immediately come over to the officer's station and line up where they're supposed to line up to go out to the rec yard. And they come right out and they line up and they're like, we want to go play handball. Salazar, give us the handball. We're ready to go play. And nobody else came out of their cells. There might have been like one guy, some old guy that is oblivious to the fact that he's in jail. It might be at the table, doing something. But everybody else in the housing unit stayed in their fucking cells. And I was like, what's going on, guys? And they're like, nothing, Salazar. We just want to go play handball. Give us the handball. We want to go outside. And I'm like, I got the feeling in my belly. So this was a moment where I had to listen to that thing, because it was like firing at full capacity. As soon as I walked into the housing unit, even before we exchanged keys with the other officer, right, I could tell something was wrong in that. My intuition immediately told me something was wrong.
Like a shift in energy?
It's 100% a shift in energy, dude. It's 100% that. It's the palpableness that exists in these moments where things are going on. And when they come and they line up and they're sitting there and I'm looking at all of them, I'm looking for a reason to say no, is what I was doing. I was looking for a reason to say, fuck you guys, go back to your cells. We're done. Go back to your cells, right? And I had just started shift. So I knew that if I said, go back to your cells, anytime I tell somebody to go to their cell, that's the equivalent of me being a police officer saying you're under arrest. Because if I tell you to go to your cell, then there's one of two things. You're going to go to your cell or I'm going to die trying to get you there. And that's the mentality that I had. So I knew that if I was going to ask these guys to go back to their cell, I better have a good goddamn reason to do it. So I was looking for a reason to tell them, no, you can't go outside. You need to go back to your cell. And the only thing that I had as far as like an indication that something was wrong was my intuition. It was my belly telling me, because if I looked at it, and that's what I was doing, I was looking at it from the outside. None of them looked angry. None of them were like, they all were chill and calm. The room was quiet. The fact that nobody had come out of their cells like normal was kind of something was off. But I ended up letting them go out. And all 8 of them go out into the rec yard. And the way that it's designed is it's just behind the officer's station. But you pop to the door, they go out there, the door closes. Now that's a contained unit, right? So that door's locked. Nobody's in and out of that space unless I unlock the door. So I've separated the unit from those 8 guys. And as soon as those 8 guys go out there, they start playing handball. And 2 seconds later, they start fighting. And it's a real violent fight between 2 guys, but a couple of them are all kind of involved with it. So I'm running over there and I'm yelling at them, knock it off, knock that shit off, right?
Yeah.
Of course they're not. So I've got to lock down the rest of the unit because I can't open and access that rec yard and expose everybody else here, or maybe more people here in this, and all the rest of it. They also are going to go out there.
Right.
So I have to leave what's going on in the rec yard while I get the rest of the unit locked down, and at the same time get help over here. And by the time all of that happens and backup arrives and we've got like 5 officers now ready to go at the door, they were done with what they were doing out there. So it was just going out and cuffing up guys and cleaning up the mess, but nobody got hurt. It wasn't like nobody got stabbed. It was just a real violent fist fight. But that taught me a real important fucking lesson. That taught me the thing of like, hey, when this thing's firing off, dude, you have got to listen to it. Otherwise people are going to get hurt.
That's that pause.
Yeah, it's totally that pause. And I don't think I understood what that thing was until, in some ways, Josh, until now. I haven't put the pieces together. I've told a lot of stories about like the guy that I pulled over that was drunk, the guy that, was getting into cars that one morning. There's all of these moments that I had as a police officer. And that moment where they went out and fought in the rec yard, I think that was the first time where I had a palpable sensation and I chose the opposite. And I tried from that point on to never repeat that. So I just learned that if I got that sensation, I had to trust it.
What did you think the right thing to do was?
In the moment, I didn't know what the right thing was, right? In the moment, I didn't know what to do. That was the problem. I was stuck between, because the rock and the hard spot was something's off, something's going to happen. I knew something was going to happen, but I was also afraid of telling them to go back to their cells. Because if I tell them to go back to their cells, I can't say, hey, John, obviously you're the guy that's the problem. You go back to your cell. The rest of these guys are going out. I just knew something was off. And so I was stuck between, I either let everything proceed as normal, like it appears everything's fine, or I tell these guys to go back to their cell. And I knew that was like, there was not another part of me, the same part of me, I'm sure, was also being like, that's not a good choice. Because if I would have told them to go back to their cell, they would have just started fighting right there. Yeah. And what would have, I shouldn't say they would have. I suspected that that's what would have happened.
Or the energy could have shifted towards you, because
the whole thing, dude, is it's like, and that's the other thing that's really interesting about, like you said, the energy could have shifted towards me, right? There's something about that kind of, violence comes with an energy, and oftentimes it's just looking for an outlet, and it could have easily shifted towards me. And so
for all intents and purposes, that was the best option in that situation.
I mean, I think so, right? At the end of the day, some guys, got bruised up and knocked up and some split lips and cuts and things like that. I went home safe. They all went home safe that day. So yeah, I can definitely see that that was the right decision in the moment, but it also gave me the awareness that that was a potentiality. So when that thing fires up and I get that sensation in my body, I trusted it from that point on, even though I that trusting it also took practice, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't something that just, oh, now I always make the right decision. It's every time that sensation happens in my body and I choose the direction that I'm going, I don't know it's the right decision.
It's
I
almost
just
like a
trust.
pull, like you're getting pulled and you just don't
Yes.
resist it because
Yes.
like there
The
isn't a
resistance is the part, Josh.
yeah.
I trust it. So I don't resist the pull. And it's very much these moments in time. It's that synchronistic spot where you have to choose left or right. And there's always going to be a knowingness of which is the correct direction. You just have to let go and trust it. And that moment in the gel has given me the ability to make the exact same decision present moment. And now I have such a close relationship with that part of my nervous system that I operate off of it all the time now, where I just trust whatever it's telling me. Get up and go get a drink. I'm going to get up and go get a drink. Earlier, as we were settling down, it took me a minute to settle, right? I was late for the podcast. I wasn't here right at 10 o'clock. I sat down. My dog was still wandering. Oh, shit, I forgot the fucking door. As soon as I get all of those things kind of situated, I sit down. I'm hot. I got to get my hair up. I got to get my socks off. I used to criticize and judge myself for all of those things. I used to be like, oh, Josh, I'm so sorry. I got to go close the door. God damn it, that fucking dog. I used to get so mad at myself. And then if I was going to sit here and take my socks off on camera, I would have been so embarrassed. I would have been like, oh my God. What I normally would have done is sat during the entire episode and just sweat and just been really uncomfortable until we got done and be like, oh my God, I'm so glad we're done. I'm so glad Josh can't see me be human now.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because that was me last time we talked. It was very
Yeah.
hot in the room and I was just like, well, I can't change it. So just go. And
Yeah.
and it's funny because that's the one that didn't work out. And you always say that, and I always believe that everything happens for a reason. And so at some point I remember when there was this, both of us had this feeling of like this heart drop when it's like, hey, the video hasn't uploaded to Drive. It's been 2 hours. We can give it a day and see what happens. And we're like, but we both knew it's probably not recorded. And so
Yeah.
there was that feeling of, at first I wanted to be upset. Like, okay, what did we do wrong? Where did we fail? What, like, I want to know, like, an immediate, like we call it in the military, after action review.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Debrief,
so
right? We're breaking down everything so we can learn from it.
yes. And so immediately I want to know what went wrong. I want to know why that happened and how we can prevent that from happening. And so I went into that mode. I wanted to go into that mode immediately. And I realized pretty quickly that that's not what Jake needed from me in that moment because he also felt bad and he was feeling like I messed up. I did something wrong. And we were both in that mode of like, where, like, who's at fault, what happened. And so everything, like I mentioned, I believe everything happens for a reason. I think that that we were supposed to have a conversation, but there's an even better one waiting. And so I believe that. So since I've learned to trust it, when I felt that, I immediately felt like I wanted to be like, okay, what happened? And then I paused and I was like, dude, we did everything we could. We looked at the settings. We looked at that it said it will record. We jumped onto here. I saw the red dot. I thought it was recording. Like, what else could we have done? And we just kind of sat there.
Exactly.
And it's like nothing. Like
Nothing.
we did what we could have, and that's it. So
Yes.
so
That's
what's
the giving up part.
yeah,
That's the release part. That's
so
the
letting go.
surrender part, right? That's the part where it's like, I have prepared myself for this moment in my life. And now I just have to let go and trust. And we do that in so many ways with, working out, with mental preparation, with all of our life experiences, like all of these things just build and build and build and build and build and build and build upon themselves, so that at every given moment of our life, we're prepared for what's in front of us. We just have to trust that we have the skill set to take us through it. And the process of that looks different for everybody. Like my experiences to help me to get to this point in my life, I've shared a lot of them, right? You've got the same type of experiences. They just look different from your lens, but they're teaching you the same lessons, where it's like, you got to trust this thing. You got to trust this thing. You got to trust this thing. And every time we trust it, turns out all right. It might turn out all right 5 years later, right? That's the other thing that I've learned, is I have to let go of the concept of not just what I want, not just what I think it is, but also time.
Mm,
In what capacity this thing is going to happen in, right?
right.
We started the podcast, and I'm like, when we started Steph and Craig, because I'm modeling everything after Mel Robbins, I set a goal. I'm like, okay, we're going to start this podcast, and I'm going to do everything that I can, and within 1 year, it's going to be a top 10 podcast. And 3 months in, I'm like, there's no creative juice here. I feel burned out. I don't like any of this. What I'm putting out, I'm not enjoying. I'm creating stuff that I'm not really connected to. And I had to let go of what I thought it would look like. I had to let go of the time constraints for with which it was going to take place in, right? I just completely let go of control of it and
Yeah.
allow it to experience whatever it's going to become.
Yeah. Letting go. Wow. What a thing to learn. What a challenging thing to learn, to just let it be, let it breathe. I think
Yeah.
I go back to that. Just let it breathe.
I think that is such a good touchstone to go back to, dude. Breath for me has been the most significant thing that opened everything else up. When I was a cop, I had a hack when we were going to calls that were intense, like when we were going to things that were going to be intense situations, where I wanted to make sure that, because after a while, once I realized that I didn't have to wait for somebody to tell me to pull my gun out and do whatever I wanted to do, not do whatever I wanted to do, but once I started to trust myself as a police officer, I recognized that every time I was going to a call, I would get gum, and I would put a piece of gum in my mouth. And at the time, I was thinking about it from the perspective of like, I like gum, I chew gum, I keep gum in my car. But what I realized over time was I would reach for gum and I would put gum in my mouth, because that would give my mouth something to do, right? There's one level where it's like the ADHD hyperfixation. I've been playing with cards throughout the whole thing, because that
Yeah.
gives my body something to do, right?
Right.
So gum gives my mouth something to do, gives my body something to do, so that I can stay connected to my body, because I got to hear that fucking inner voice. I got to hear my gut when it goes off. But if I'm not connected to my body, then I can't hear that voice. So I would throw gum in subconsciously. So as I'm going on, like I was in a pursuit once where we didn't get to pit the guy. And I say get to, because as a cop, you're like, police chases are really fun. And if you get to, bump the back bumper and the guy spins out, like I've seen that movie 100 times. I wanted to fucking experience that. And we had a chase once where I was right behind the guy. Another officer is behind me. So my sole job is just to follow the guy. I'm just the pursuit guy. I don't have to do any radio traffic. I don't have to worry about anything. I'm just dog on the bone. I'm just focused on this bad guy, following him wherever he goes. And the officer behind me is dispatching and calling out everything. So he's the one that's letting everybody else knows what's going on. And we follow this guy around town for a little bit. He's not stopping. He's also not like hurting anybody. I mean, he's going fast, but he's not like recklessly driving, right?
Right.
So he gets outside of town and we're still following him. And policy says that we can't pit. Pit stands for, I don't remember what it stands for. It's an acronym for when you bump that back bumper. And it's the whole training process. Like they don't just say cops go knock cars around and, play demolition derby on the highway. There's training involved in it and everything like that. But our department did not offer that training because our chief did not want us out there pitting cars. Well, Highway Patrol has that training. They also have cars designed to do it. So out of nowhere, this trooper comes flying up and pits the guy right in front of me. Doesn't tell anybody because he was on a different radio channel. So out of nowhere, we're doing like 70 on the highway. And this trooper comes up and basically takes over the pursuit, which fuck you, don't do that. And then pits the guy right in front of me. And the guy loses control and pops up over the meeting. He didn't flip or anything, but it was one of those situations where, I mean, I had to have full access to all functions of my body, as well as the ability to speak, the ability to, tunnel vision is wide open. And I'm not saying it's because I had a piece of gum in my mouth, but because I had a piece of gum in my mouth, I was connected to my body, so I could feel the sensation when it needed to come. I was also breathing because I'm chewing gum, so I'm
Right.
getting oxygen into my system. And that alone has been the thing that really stuck with me, was the importance of breath. And then fast forward later on in life, I go through yoga training and I become a yoga teacher and learn the importance of breath. And then next part, I'm in jujitsu and I'm like, oh my God, jujitsu is all about breath. Jujitsu is a game of let me take your breath away from you, right? And so the importance of taking a breath, and we've been talking a lot about that pause moment earlier when you were talking about you and Jake kind of stressing about the last episode that we recorded that didn't end up getting recorded. You talked about like both of you kind of just paused in that moment because you both were like, oh shit, what do we do? Is somebody in trouble? I don't know what's going to happen. And I think the beautiful thing is the two of you allowed yourselves that pause together and then just had a bunch of compassion for each other rather than, what the fuck, dude? I can't believe you fucking did that. Like,
And there was that like energy of like, whose fault is it?
exactly.
Like that, there was just that like pause of like, whose fault was it? It's like, is it my fault? Is it my fault?
Yeah.
And both of us are fighting that. And so I think that, like you mentioned, I think that's why it was important to like just breathe. Did we do everything we could have? Did we double check everything? Yes, we did. So what's the point of this energy? Like, this energy is not good for us. So what do we need to do? And so then the next best thing was like, dude, we did what we could. It's okay. If it's meant to happen, it'll happen again. And we both just believed in that. And that's I think that went a long way for us. And I'm glad that we went that route, because it's always, you just never know when you respond with whose fault is it, or you respond with anxiety and you respond with fear. It's palpable. Other people energy is something people can feel. And I think that a lot of times, and this could be a whole other conversation about, I used to think that having thoughts and not saying them out loud was not hurtful, but I realize now that creates energy, and people can feel energy, and so it is hurtful. So if you feel a certain type of way, if you have to listen to it and ask yourself, why am I seeing this person this way, so that you can address it. Because if you continue to project that energy to those people, they're going to feel it, and it's going to create something.
This brings up for me, there's a new podcast that came out in the latter part of 2024. I think it was released back in October, and it's called the Telepathy Tapes. It's the first season is just wrapped up, and they're doing work on the second season. And it's the podcast that I have been sending to all of my friends. It's the podcast that I like sent to all my kids. I told Stephanie, I binged it in like 3 days, like a Netflix series. I was out driving around. The Telepathy Tapes. And it's literally the podcast that I'm sending everybody to right now. But it starts off with, they have research, or they did studies, back in the day, and it's not long time ago. It's within the last probably decade or so. This research lady, and I don't remember names very well at times, and so I apologize because I don't remember this woman's name. This is a really important podcast for me, but they were doing studies where, because they kept getting reports, they kept working with non-speaking, or I can't remember the verbiage that they use, but that's a big spectrum, right? Sometimes non-speaking autistic kids still have some ability to communicate vocally. And what they were finding was that they were hearing from parents and from teachers that these non-speaking autistic kids that they were working with could read their minds. And so it becomes this beautiful story that they play out, and not a story in a fiction sense. It's very much fact-based things that they're doing, and they're showing and documenting how non-speaking autistic kids are able to, it's tests like, they'll show mom a card, and non-speaking, their child's in a different room, and they show mom a card, and the kid knows what the card is. And that's just like the tip of the iceberg of it. But it's kind of what we were talking about, where you can feel other people's energy, you can feel other people's emotions, you can feel what they're going through. And I think the pause is such an important aspect of it, because the way that I've looked at this now at my life, at least where I'm at right now today, is in those pause moments, I turn towards love. And whether it's love for myself, and truthfully, that's what it always is for me. I always try to come back to that space of just self-love, and I'm reflecting, because the pause oftentimes is all of these inner judgments that I have about myself. I
Exactly.
fucked that up. I told the story about the big live podcast that we did back at Chris. It was a beautiful fucking podcast for 4 people.
Yeah.
Me, Ben, and our wives got to have a beautiful holiday fucking gift. Nobody else watched it because you couldn't see it. It was just too much with the audio. But the pause moment gave me the opportunity to dump as much love on myself, because right afterwards I was in shame, and it took me all weekend. We recorded this like on a Thursday, and I didn't talk to Ben about it, I think, until the next week, because I was so ashamed. I thought he was going to hate me. I thought he was going to be so mad at me. I invited his wife over to the house. We had this, it was like this whole ordeal. So I had to sit in that pause moment. And the work for me in that moment was, do I turn towards myself with love, or do I go towards fear? Because fear is, Brave Mandare's over. Ben hates me. This is the end of everything. Fuck Steph and Craig. I'm done with podcasting. I hate all of this shit. I just fucked everything up. I'm done with this. I'm going to go work at Walmart and just be a fucking door greeter. That's all my fear that's spinning in all sorts of different ways. And I have to sit with it, and I have to feel it, and I have to interact with it. But now I just go towards love. And that game is hard. Like, it's hard for me to do that at times. It's really hard. And I don't always successfully do it, right? I'm still in the process of learning how to trust love. I'm still in the process of learning to turn towards this thing and just being like, yeah, dude, it's okay. Mistakes happen, And when I did talk to Ben about it finally, he was like, yeah, we felt so bad. Like, we knew, like, that. Yeah, dude, we felt so bad. Like, we knew that it was like, there was zero anger. There was zero disappointment. There was nothing but understanding and love from him. And I think that giving ourselves and the people around us, our family, our, partners, kids, truthfully, just fucking society and humanity as a whole, giving them the opportunity for that pause. And in that pause moment, don't rush to judgment, don't rush to criticism, don't rush to pointing at them and be like, what did you just do? Let them pause and just be there with them compassionately in the moment, so that they have the opportunity to know that, oh, I just made a mistake, but the person that saw the mistake still loves me.
It's the safety that I'm safe.
Yes.
I'm safe here.
Yes.
I think that's
so crucial.
One of the things that I talk to Jake about is that, and this is how I say it in my mind, is he lives here. Like this, he lives here too. And so because when we have,
tell me more about that, Josh. I want to hear more about that thought process. Share that more with me if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that when I asked him to be a part of Win the Night, I wanted him to live here, to take up space here, to be a part of it, in that he gets to put his things in it. He gets to it gets to feel like home for him. And so what that entailed for me was to have him to give him the trust of that you can run this thing how you see fit. You can express yourself here in the way that you see fit. If you think this is a good idea of doing this with the channel, or doing that, or changing something in it, go for it. Do it.
Yeah.
You live here. And so once I started seeing it that way, when something would happen that would go wrong, like in this case where videos didn't record, my initial instinct reaction to judge, I paused at now, of like, wait, he lives here. And so that means he gets to make mistakes here. That means he gets to come up with an idea that doesn't work out. That means he gets to create something that we both love. That means he gets to create something that I'm not a huge fan of, but he is. And so that is what living with somebody entails. And this is his home. And so that's how I wanted it to be. And in order for that to be that way, these are the things I have to address. And so that's kind of the stage that we have to go through for that.
Who taught you that, Josh?
I didn't, I don't know. It was just a gut thing. I didn't really like find it anywhere. It was just a
You have
realization.
just given me such a beautiful gift.
Well, thank you. No,
I want to share with you
yeah.
why, dude. As you're describing that, first and foremost, it's absolutely beautiful. I just want to speak to it and acknowledge it right off the bat for what it is, right? It's fucking beautiful. And as you're talking about it, I'm hearing it through the lens of like, hey, we all live here. Like, this is our house. This is our planet. We all live here. I like to create this stuff over here. You like to create that stuff over here. Sometimes we're going to bump into each other and have some conflict and some issues and some mistakes. But if we just all allow each other the pause and the opportunity, not to explain themselves, not to justify, not to tell me why you did what you did, but just to see the humanity and the humanness in people. So that beautiful little thing that you're saying to yourself, which I'm going to take and borrow, by the way, I'll do my best to give like credit where credit's due when I can remember it. But that's beautiful, dude. The concept and idea that, hey, we all live here. And you've done it in this little example with you on the podcast and with Jake. It's so awesome. I absolutely love it.
It's what really has changed our friendship, because we've been friends for years, since high school.
Really?
And life has thrown us together multiple times. And so that's why I told him, I was like, we're supposed to do something big, clearly, because we just keep getting thrown at each other over and over again. And so we just have to kind of listen now. And I think that in the past, those things that I've been telling you about, the ego, and it was for both of us, we would like, no, I want the controls. I want the controls. I want the controls. And it's just this fight back and forth for who gets this final say.
I think that's important to look at too. Like you said, it's for, we both do this thing. So that sensation that you just described of like, we both have this ego that wants to kind of battle it out for control over this situation. That's not a Josh thing. That's not a Jake thing. That's not a Craig thing. That's a human thing. That's an experience that takes place being a human.
Yeah.
So just acknowledging that we all kind of have that part inside of us that we're going to have to learn how to hear, like we talked about earlier, that you said you've been able to tune into that ego voice and recognize it and then do the opposite. That's what you're talking about right there. I fucking love this conversation, dude.
That's why I'm saying, like, I felt like, no, we need to have another conversation. Like, this is a thing that's going to happen. And I told Jake, like, I believe in it. And so just let it be. And so I'm just glad that intuition has never been wrong. And so far this is another example. But I think that the fighting for the controls thing has always been a problem for us. Every time we got thrown together, the first time we got thrown together to do video projects for, originally was with comedy sketches, and we still love comedy sketches, by the way. We started out in high school doing like, hey, it would be funny if we did like this thing. And Jake is a mastermind. He's a fucking genius when it comes to anything video cinema. He has no degree in it, and he creates some of the most amazing things I've ever seen. It's just the way I consider him like a supernova. It's just this energy that just radiates in all directions. And I said, Jake, if ever you just go, I'm going to put all of this focus into one thing, I said, you will become a millionaire overnight. It's just, you have this radiance to you that if wherever your energy hits, even if it's for just a moment, there's just this brilliance that comes with it. And so I told him, I was like, maybe the thing for you, and you'll be able to answer that someday, is the challenge might be for you to hone in that energy into a singular spot at a time. And then you'll just be unstoppable. And so it's one of the conversations that I have with him. But originally it was because when we did the videos for the comedy sketches in high school, I would be like, it would be really funny if we did this idea of like doing this, and then Jake would be like, cool, I think that it would be better if it was blah, 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 blah. And suddenly the idea was nothing what I had originally said. And it wasn't even originally what he had intended. It was just like, I want the controls. No, I want the controls. And it just would just collapse. And it happened 2 times. It happened that happened in high school. And then so after a while, I was like, I don't really want to do these anymore. And so I moved, and so we kind of stopped talking for a while.
Okay.
And then another few years go by. At this point, I'm in the Marine Corps and I'm doing MMA, and so I was teaching at this time, and so I got really close with the owner, and so there was this discussion about having a videographer. Hey, we're going to have videos, training videos. We're going to have advertisements, and so we're like, I was like, oh, cool, like
Is it the place you're training for MMA?
Where I was, yeah.
Okay, okay.
And so I was like, cool, yeah. Like I think we should do. I could help you out. I have a friend that does videos, so I reach out to Jake. I was like, hey, Jake, this is what's going on. Would you be interested? He was like, yeah, right away. And so we jump on it, and this was just before COVID, and so we start creating all these websites, and he starts making websites for them. We start shooting videos and promotions and stuff, and so it became a control issue where with the owners there was just this feeling of like, hey, please give more without compensation. And so Jake came up to me and was like, hey dude, like I'm not I've asked about pay and they said they were going to pay me, and like we're now a few projects and I don't think it's going to happen. And so I was like, dude, if you feel like it's not the right thing, move away. And so eventually there was just that retreat, and then COVID happened and shut everything down. And so that was like a nail in the coffin for that way I was going in life.
Yeah.
Because originally I was going to be involved fully in MMA. I was going to be my plan was to at some point get into the octagon and start fighting and stuff, but it just didn't pan out that way. Yeah. And so then we get thrown together again for this because I'm like, I'm starting this thing with this podcast and I'm like, I need help. Like I started filming the first few episodes. I did the filming, I did the editing, I did the posting, I did everything. And it was such a nightmare. I hated it.
It's so hard, isn't it? It's
I hated it. It was awful. It was not fun. I hated seeing my face every time I had to and I was like criticize myself, like, why did I say that way? And it was just like the little things. And so as I was watching it, it was basically me hurting myself while I was watching it. So it's like, so I hated it. Yeah. And then I was like, I'm going to need help. I'm going to get burned out very quickly. And so I got through about 9 episodes before I told Jake, I was like, hey, this is what I'm doing. Would you be able to help? Same thing. He was like, I'm doing this project currently. He was working with another YouTuber. He was doing editing for them. He's like, I'm working with this project currently, but give me some time. I'll let you know once I have some time. I was like, okay, whatever. And so from my perspective, I was like, I did my part. I felt like internally that part was complete. And so check mark, right? And so I moved on. So I moved on. And then like a month or 2 goes by and he messages me and he goes, hey, I'm all free now, dude. I'm not doing that project anymore. Let's do this. And so he jumps on board, and so the same old things that we used to have issues with started coming back, right? Of the like, I think it'd be better if we did this. I think it'd be better if we did that. And it's just this back and forth, back and forth. And at some point, originally our guests, which are our friends, got to see our clashes. Yeah. And so then when we would be like, and so then they would, I realized I was going into some of these interviews like energetically like leveled, like I was like really high up here in stress, and I was like, I can't be going into these interviews like this. Like I can't be open. I can't.
You
be present.
can see the end result, right? You can see those episodes when you were at like a 7, 8, 9 with your anxiety, nervous system. I'm stressed out. So much going on. Me and Jake fighting. The end result is tainted in a sense, not in a necessary. I mean, everything is a mixture of what goes in to make it right, but you can see it's not the thing that you were hoping that it would be.
It's and it's just like the energy affects the guests too. They can feel it. That's why I was talking about even if you don't say anything, if there's a tension in the air, people pick up on that. They can feel it. It's palpable. Yeah. And so our guests would feel it, and I'm like, okay, we need to address this, because I was like, it is not first of all, like, I'm getting angry with you and I'm judging you. Why? And so then I look at myself there and I'm like, what can I do? I asked him, what can I do to better listen to you? That's the first thing that I asked him, because if he's feeling like I'm not hearing him, there's
What
something.
a great question to ask, Josh.
I just like, I have to figure out like there's something that clearly I'm not hearing him, because if he
Yeah.
feels he has to, if he feels he has to get louder, I am not hearing him. And so
That's
then,
such good awareness. That right there. If somebody's getting louder when they're talking to you, maybe it's because you're not actually hearing what they're trying to tell you. And then our ego says, no, I heard what he said. I'm going to get louder so that he hears me. Right.
and it's just this.
Instead of just being like, oh, I noticed that that person's getting louder. I wonder what they're trying to tell me. And then get like really fucking curious. And here's Josh over here doing this just fucking on a Tuesday. That's so awesome, dude.
I want to say too, by the way, it's not like I was just like, oh, I just figured everything out like all by
Oh, I know
myself.
it's sloppy.
It wasn't like, it wasn't clean. We tripped and fell, and mind you, I'm still in therapy. Like I've stayed in therapy throughout this time that we've been doing this, and I've had pauses, of course, but I've stayed consistent with it, where it's like, I'm going to take a pause for this long and then I'm coming back. Then I'm going to take a pause for this long. I'm coming back for this long. And so then that has helped me also keep myself centered. I told my therapist that I was like, so here's the thing, the people around me, for their own, whatever journeys they've been through, for their own reasons, have a hard time handling their emotions, as we all do. And I'm in a position where I can be the most centered person in the room. And so if I can be, then when there's an energy shift, when something is happening where an energy starting to tank, where I can feel someone starting to spiral, I have to be an anchor, because if I go down with them, I can't help them. And so I think that that's the staying in therapy has allowed me to become the anchor, because before, when we were in high school, I went with them. We went down the spiral together, and it was just an absolute nightmare all the way down. And it would ultimately end with resentment on either side, where we both judge each other, we both are upset, and we have to move away. And so something had to be different here. And fortunately, I was in a position where I can be an anchor. And that's what I feel like I currently am tasked to do spiritually. Of, you are an anchor until otherwise notified. And so it's not like I figured it out all by myself. I've been in therapy to help me stay centered. I think what I can't give myself credit for is that when I'm in those situations, I pause and I go, what am I not seeing? What am I not hearing? And then figure it out from, okay, what's next? What's the next step? And that's what happened with me and Jake. Is that happened over and over and over and over. And so
Because you kept being the anchor. Because you
yeah,
kept being the person that was able to stand there and regulate their nervous system, keep the pause. Let's keep the pause as long as we need to, until everybody feels safe in this moment, so that we can take a deep breath and see each other and come up with a solution together, come up with a plan together, so that we can move forward together, not in the space separate, right? You and Jake got the opportunity to practice this, and I don't know about you, but it sounds to me like you're fucking nailing it. It sounds to me like you're doing a great job at it.
we're so our friendship has evolved into like he's an integral part of my life. And
Oh, that's beautiful.
there's this I told Jake, there is no In the Night without Jake Freudinger. And so I told him, like, if
Great
ever.
name for a podcast, by the way. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that I told him that it's one of those things that I was like, he kept telling me for a long time, he's like, this is your soul, this is your soul. And I told him, no, that's when I told him, like, you live here, like, this is your house, and so therefore it is ours. It is not mine or yours, it is ours. We get to drive this ship for now. I said, at some point, if somebody else wants to drive it and we feel like it's time for us to do something else, then that's what I want. I want this to be a vessel, and we don't get to drive it forever, and we don't get to dictate what happens everywhere we go. At some point, this is just a vessel we both have built together, and hopefully can take other people somewhere they need to go. And I think that that's one of the things that we both fully trust is the truth. And I think that because we trust that, whenever we do have issues, like we still have things that come up where we're like hurdles that we have to go through, but there's a trust that we'll figure it out now. There's a trust that, hey, this is an issue today, but it won't be tomorrow. And because we'll figure it out. And there's that trust of you're going to be here and so am I. So let's do it. And that's changed our approach to this whole thing of how we do things. It's like, hey, I want to do this. Cool, go for it. See what happens. And there is no, I don't think like, oh, what if this happens? What if that? I don't think that anymore. I used to. There was a fear involved. Like, oh, what if this ruins it? What if this does something? It's gone completely. And that's because of those repetitive conflicts we have to go through. And so everything happens for a reason is the point.
I'm going to take a deep breath, dude. I'm pausing right now because you just dropped a bunch of beautiful stuff on me that I just want to make sure that I absorb. Josh, I'm so grateful for this time with you, brother. It has felt so good to be in space with you, to hear your words, to hear these things that you've been sharing and talking about. You sharing this part with you and Jake. I'm immediately implementing it. I'm going to go hang out with Ben later today. We got another project. He's got some cool stuff that he's creating on his end that I get to go help him with. And first thing I'm going to do is show up and do my best to kind of articulate this concept with him, because it's a beautiful concept that you've stumbled upon here in a really beautiful way. And it's had a massive impact on me in this moment. I just really want to thank you for that.
And I'm thankful for you for you not only coming back and saying, hey, I'm going to make a schedule for this and take time out of my day, because it is, time is the most precious thing we have. And so when people share it as the way you've shared it with me, it's not something I take for granted. So thank you. I really do appreciate you being here and talking with me. I did want to connect with you in one other way before we call it a day.
As many ways as you want, brother. I'm happy to connect in any way possible.
You had a story you said earlier that in my mind, you know what I said in my head? I was like, I feel like I'm talking to a spiritual mirror in some way. And so the reason why is because you talked about your brother and how that necklace that you wanted, you took a punch for, and you said something that I hadn't thought about ever until just this moment. And I finally realized what the conflict between my brother and I was, what the real reason why I felt the resentment or rejection from him. Because my brother and I also had that similar situation of like, I did do the thing you just said about you put the father role, like because you didn't have your dad in your life, you put the father role on him. You moved it to him.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. And I tried to fight it. I did when I was younger, which was 6th grade also. He was in 8th grade and I was in 6th grade. And he was in the age bracket where he kind of wanted to be his own identity. He didn't want to be attached to me anymore. Like he wanted to have his own group. Because when my parents divorced, it was just me and him. Like my other siblings, they were with my dad. Like they stayed with my dad. My mom took me and my brother when they split. And so it was just me and my brother for the time I was like 5 years old until I moved out of until my sister was born. And so it was 10 years. So 10 years together.
What's your brother's name?
Brian. And so
I have a brother named Brian.
That's why as soon as you told that story and you said his name, I was like, I feel like I'm talking to a mirror. But so him and I were the closest in age, and he was really my older brother. He really had to step up. Like he had to be a dad too at like a very young age. Not actually, but like a dad to me. And so he had to make food for me because my mom would work 2 jobs. And so my brother and I didn't see my mom for a long time, for like many years that she worked 2 jobs. So basically it was me and my brother taking care of ourselves from the time I was like 5 to whenever she met my stepdad, which was like 8 or something. And even then I genuinely feel like we were by ourselves for a long time. But anyway, he made food for me, so my mom would leave some food to heat up, and so he would heat up the food when we would get home from school. We'd walk ourselves home from school, and so
Right.
then so then he would come with me, and we would get home, and he would wait for me when I would get out of school, and so we would both come home together, and so we had a very tight bond when we were young. And so he made food for me, and then we would eat together, we would hang out together, we would play together. And so then when the whole thing happened with my mom getting married to my stepdad, it put a ton of tension between us, because my stepdad was not good. He was abusive to us, not physically but emotionally and verbally abusive. He genuinely never accepted me or my brother. We were always obstacles, and he made it known. He
Yeah.
used to say it when my mom was not there. He would tell me and my brother that we were not his responsibility. That we were that at 18 he saw us like getting out of the house. Like that was his dream, of that at 18 we pack up and we go, because we, by all accounts, we aren't his family, and that was made clear uh, because we never met his family members. The only ones we did interact with were his daughters, but they weren't around long. They were all adults and had their own kids, so and that created a problem on its own with his daughters. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Um,
Mhm.
but he made it very clear that he didn't accept us as his kids, and basically that we were a burden, and that was made very clear to me and to my brother. And so that created tension between us, because we were in survival mode. Home was not home. Home was not safe. And so in the teenage years, there was this distancing of like, it's your fault. And so there's this resentment I could feel that he didn't verbalize, but I could feel the resentment. And so he started to separate himself from me. And I didn't realize it until you said it, that I did put that bracket of dad on him
Yeah.
when my dad was no longer in my life. And so when he also pushed me away, I got rejected by my dad, my stepdad, and now my brother, and I saw him as a father figure. And so
Mhm.
when in 6th grade, when I was already feeling that way, my defense for that, the way I defended myself, was I told him, I don't need you. I said to him, one time there's these 7th graders. It was my first day of 6th grade. We were walking to school. He wanted to have a distance between us, so I was walking with my friend from elementary that we were both going into 6th grade, and he was in 8th grade. We were going to middle school together, so for the first time we were walking to the same place. So he kept a pace ahead of me, because he didn't want to be walking with me. He wanted to make
Mhm.
that separation. And so we were tailing behind him, me and my friend. And so we were walking, and then these 7th graders kind of cross our path because they're walking the same direction. And then they're like, whatever they do, like, oh, look at these new 6th grade, tiny 6th graders or whatever. And whatever 7th graders say to bully 6th
Right.
graders.
All those things that they say to sixth graders.
Yeah, and so he starts saying all this stuff, and we start talking back to him, and so then my brother just pauses, turns back around, and he walks towards them, and he goes, "Why don't you pick on someone your own size?" And those kids dart, like they just take off, and so they run across the street, and then my brother comes up to me and he goes, "That's the last time I'm ever doing anything for you." He's like, "You're on your own," and he walks away. And I said, "I didn't," and I said as he's walking away, I was like, "I don't need you." And that was the inner kid of like
Yeah.
protecting himself and saying like, I'm going to reject your rejection of me. And so that was my protection, was to reject him back. And that's something that it's still an ongoing process. It's not fully healed. We talked about it actually for the first time when he came home from Japan, middle of last year. So all this stuff is very recent. It's not something that we had openly discussed up until that moment, of like favoritisms and why the resentment was there. And so there was a favoritism from his perspective, and I totally see why. I do believe that that's true, that my mom favored me, and there was favorites, and it was clear who it was. And so then there was a resentment for that. And he has his own stuff going on with that, of feeling rejected, feeling less than. And so what do? You minimize that person because look, they're not that great. See, they're not that great. And that was always the argument. And for me, it felt like I had this target on my back I didn't ask for. And so there was just this growing up in my home was very chaotic. It was very unsafe, very tense. If tension had a home, it was my house, and you could feel it. And so, that story of your brother, of the wanting to be accepted by him, is something that I connect with on a very, very deep level. So, thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And man, I think
I want to keep pausing for a minute because as you're speaking, the gift of me speaking, what we're doing right now, Josh, I'm just going to speak to it, right? Because when I show up on podcasts, it's the thing that I try. It's what I always try to do on Steph and Craig, on Brave Man Dare. Anytime I go on a podcast, I'm doing the best that I can to just show up as myself. And over the years, that's looked very differently. And I've tried to show up with vulnerability. I've tried to show up with this. It's constantly trying to show up how I think people want, right? Trying to show up to meet the needs of the people around me so that they'll like me rather than just showing up of myself. But I know that there's this thing now where all I have to do is show up and be myself and always turn towards love and open my heart, even when it's hard. And then you talking about the impact that me talking about my brother had on you, and now you're sharing your impact in regards to your relationship with your brother, Brian, it plants me firmly in the relationship with my brother, Brian, who it's safe to say we don't really have a relationship at this point in our life. I don't communicate with him at all. And if I do, it's a text message, maybe once or twice a year. I haven't seen him in over a decade. And I had never put the pieces together that he might feel resentment towards me for being my mom's favorite, because I definitely felt like my mom's favorite. And I felt like it was something that everybody knew. I felt like it was obvious that I was the favorite. And I liked that. Like that gave me a sense of feeling better than my brothers did when I was little, which also helped me feel safe when I was little because I was special. My mom liked me the most, so it made me feel special, right? And all of those things are processing through my body as you're talking, and it's sparking all of these memories and these moments. And I have so much love for my brothers, so much love for both of them. And I've been asking myself, how do I reach them? How do I find them? How do I connect with them? Because I miss them. I miss my brothers. The fact is I talked earlier about our childhood being one way and it's awesome and cool. And yeah, everybody's childhood has some rough patches, right? And then this other way. And ever since I've seen the perspective of my childhood through the lens of trauma and abuse and all of those kind of different things, it felt like I was getting pushed away even further from my family and from my brothers. But I also wasn't willing to jeopardize like myself and the little inner part of me, all these parts of me that were hurt over the years. And I haven't been able to put together the pieces to understand how to make it all fit. And you have helped me in this moment by what you've shared in understanding my relationship with my brother, Brian. You've opened up my heart like, the Grinch where his heart grows 10 times. Like, I feel like that's what just happened listening to you, Josh, is my heart just went big breath in it. Instead of contracting and my heart shrinking, I took breath into my body and opened up, and my heart just opened and expanded and stayed in this beautifully open space now to receive more and feel more. I'm connected to Brian more. I'm connected to you more. I'm connected to my past more. I'm overcome with love and gratitude for you right now for the way that you showed up and shared with me, because it's helped me so much. I have a question that I have been, how we get these things. I've been talking this whole episode about trusting that gut instinct.
Go for it.
When it comes in conversation with each other, my wife and I have danced with it for years and years and years, because part of it's ADD and we'll be talking and neither one of us can stay focused, and then we're distracting each other. Oh, did you remember we have to get milk? And then we're talking about milk, and I don't think we have to get milk. Don't we have to get almond milk? No, we got almond milk last week. Don't you remember? And then we're completely gone. We don't even know what the fuck we're talking about. But when we're connected with each other, like you and I have been over the course of this episode, and when we're tapped in and we're like present with each other, it's the pause that we've been referring to. I will still get those same, hey, say this, hey, say this, but it's not ADHD distraction squirrely. Anyways, I'm drinking coffee. I fucking like coffee. Do you like coffee?
Right.
It's not that sensation.
Right.
It's the indication that there's something that I need to say that will spark something else in Josh. And then Josh picks that up and it lights him up. And then, oh, my word sparks. So that's the exchange that takes place. So I want to ask you a question.
Go for it.
Is there anybody in your life who has been in the military? Do you have anybody else that was in the Marines? Anybody else that was in the military?
I have a whole community. Yeah.
Yes. But specifically, like within the scope of your family, somebody really
Oh,
close.
within my family? No.
Not that you can think of?
No, I was the only. So technically, not the only. My mom's cousin, I believe, was a Marine. But other than that, I was the oddball. Like I came into the Marine when I said I wanted to be in the Marine Corps, like I want to be a Marine, everyone went nuts. Like, what are you doing? Like there was just this just outcry of don't do that, don't do it. It actually sparked it really did spark the need of like, no, this is the right. Like when everybody was saying no, like I felt in my soul like this is where I need to go.
Is that when you started trusting that gut instinct?
Well, I would say that I didn't even notice it until like genuinely notice it until like 3 years ago. When I had my last relationship ended. It was so catastrophic for me, the end of that like I was like, okay, because if you would have talked to me 3 years ago, I would have told you that I wasn't very spiritual. I would have told you that that I'm agnostic. I would have told you that I can't see that there is or that there isn't. So I'll just say that there might be or there might not be, and I can't prove it either way. And that was my satisfied answer, was that like can't prove it, can't disprove it. So it's just there.
Yeah.
Like if the conversation comes up, I'll listen to you, but like I had an inclination that it is more likely than not, when we close our eyes and say goodbye forever, it's done. Like that's how I used to see it. And so that the trusting the gut thing, like the intuition, the something is there, wasn't until that happened, where it's like, okay, I have resisted this feeling that I've had for so long of like when things are hard and I don't want to do it because I'm afraid, and I know I'm supposed to go in this direction, but I continue to not listen to it. I always wind up here. So what am I not doing? Like if there is something there, okay, I'm open because I have nothing. Like there's everything is gone. I had left the Marine Corps. I left my job. I had a relationship that collapsed all at the same time. So I was like, I'm at ground zero. I have nothing else. I was like, if there's anything there, okay, I'm ears.
Make yourself known.
Yeah, I'm all ears because I'm out of ideas. I don't have anything else.
I need help.
I need help, and I think that's when I really noticed it. But I didn't know what it was. I guess at the time was the gut feeling. I was like, no, I want to go this way. Like I know this. Here's what I said. I was like, if I don't do this, I will have the what if for the rest of my life, and I can't live with that. I can't live with the what if. And so I'd rather go and fail than to not go there at all and wonder if I should have. And I've lived my life that way up until very recently, where I now have more tools to listen to. My tools before were, if I don't do this, I won't be able to live the rest of my life comfortably. And that's what was my guiding tool before, that I now recognize to be that spirit guide, or deeper intuition, if you will. So when I originally had said I wanted to enlist, there was this no, like Don't go, don't do it. You're going to die. They're going to send you to war. One of my brothers said they're going to drug you. Like they're going to do all this stuff, like experiment with you. And so there was all these fears that they had within them, and they were putting it on me. And so I was like, you know, despite all of those fears, if I don't do this, I won't be comfortable. So I'm going to go. And I actually have a quote. You don't see it there, but in the new season, I actually got a quote up there. One of my buddies who's a Marine, he was diagnosed with cancer like late last year, and so one of the things he said to me that literally gave me the energy, the boost of energy I needed to just go and get there, and then figure it out from there, was when he said, he sat down. He came home from boot camp. He was 17 when he went to boot camp, by the way. He was the first to ever do it. I call him number one because that's his nickname, number one, because he went first. And he was of our group, of our friend group. And he was 17. He graduated high school early to go do it. So I think I look up to him for that. I was like, dude, like you went 17 years. I thought about it before becoming a Marine. I took a year. And he graduated early. He's like, I'm going. And he went at 17 to boot camp. What an animal. So I have a quote of his that he said to me when I asked him. I was like, hey, do you think I can make it? I sat down and I was like, do you think I can make it? Because I had doubts after all the things my family was saying.
Yeah.
And he looked at me and he was like, thought about it for a second and was like, you'll make it as long as you never say the words I quit. And he looked me into my soul when he said that to me. And I was just like, it's such a simple thing. You think like it's not that great. When you read the quote, you're like, okay, it seems like a cliche thing to say. But the moment in which he said it to me was why it's so important. Because it was in the moment in which I doubted myself the most. It was in the moment in which I was starting to think that my family might be right. It was in the moment that I didn't know if this was what I was supposed to do, where he looked at me and he said, you'll make it as long as you never say I quit. There wasn't you have to get faster, you have to run more miles, you have to lose more weight, there wasn't any of that. It was, you'll make it as long as you don't say I quit. Like that's the only prerequisite to that. And I took that with me when I went to boot camp. There was many moments where I wanted to quit. There's many moments where I was like, what am I doing? There's many moments where I was like, because I was no athlete. I just want to make that perfectly clear. I didn't go to any sports. When I was in high school, I was at home. I didn't really like interacting with people. So I just sat down and was at home playing video games, at home watching TV. That's what I did. So I wasn't by any means an athlete. And so when I went to boot camp, it was really Marine Corps boot camp is the highest level of difficulty for a basic training that you can do without having any kind of athleticism that you could make. It's the last branch where it really is mental, because if you go to like special forces, there even your pure will, your body has a breaking point. And so if you don't elevate your body's breaking point by training it to a certain level, it's no amount of willpower will get you through that. It just, your body will break.
Right.
And
it's just mechanics things almost.
it's just the body's limit. And so you have to raise the limit of your body if you're going to be a special forces on top of that will,
right,
and that grit to really get through no matter what. There have been plenty of people, even in the Marine Corps when I was in boot camp, that got dropped, that had the grit, like they wanted it so badly and they deserved it. In my perspective, they deserved to be Marines, and their body just quit on them. The muscles couldn't hold it. They'd tear. What freak accidents would happen. Those are things that just the body has limits to, right? So the Marine Corps is really, for me, the way that I see it, the last branch of basic training military course you can go to. That's the highest level of difficulty for basic training that won't completely break you, that you have a chance of not completely being broken if you aren't an athlete. I hope that makes sense.
That makes total sense to me. I understand completely what you're describing.
So when he told me that, right, I took that with me to boot camp, and I experienced moments where I remember one specific moment when we were going through the obstacle course. It's one of the first things you do when you get there. And I went through the obstacle course, and I was able to kind of stumble my way through it, and I finished most of it. And then I got to one point, which was the where you climb the rope. I was so exhausted. I was so tired. I had forgotten how you were going to climb the rope. And so I was just going to try to muscle my way up. And some people could. They were just beasts like that. They could just muscle their way up. No technique. They're just very strong all the way up. I didn't have that. I wasn't an athlete. So I went up and tried to do it, and I didn't think about how I was doing it. And I couldn't get my legs wrapped around it correctly. I was sliding from it. And there was this officer there, he was not the company commander. He was the what's the word? A series commander. So there are two series. They're called follow series and lead series. And so lead series was what series I was from. And so each series gets a certain amount of platoons. I think it's like 3. And so lead series had 3, and then follow series had another 3. And so they get an officer for that and an officer for the other one. So that officer that was lead series officer, he was there monitoring at the rope. And so he's watching me fail over and over again. And he's just like, just get down. You're not going to make it. He's like, just get over here. Like, I'm tired of seeing you. He's like, I'm tired of seeing you fail, is what he said. And so he's like, just get over here. And he wrote on my hand like that I failed at. And in my perspective, I thought that was over. Like, I thought, if I don't make this specific thing in this course, I'm failing. But apparently
did you thought you were like out?
I thought I was going to get kicked out.
Okay.
So there was a moment where I was like, that's when I knew I no matter what, they were going to have to kick me out. That's the only way I'm leaving here. And so that moment happened after that event when he put that thing, and I was like, oh man, am I done? Like, am I getting sent back home? And there was this inner panic of like, I can't go home. Like, I won't be able to look my family in the face if I go home. I can't go home. That was the as long as you never quit thing came up, where it's like, right. I could never come home if I don't make it. Like, that was my mentality. And so that got me through boot camp, through other difficult times, because it just turned out that you actually can, there's a certain requirement of how many obstacles you get through in the obstacle course. And so apparently I met the minimum. I don't know what it is. I never looked into it actually, but right. I know that there's a minimum. And so obviously they didn't kick me and send me back home. So, so then I was like, okay, so maybe I can do it. Once I got past, I was like, okay, maybe I can make it. I don't have to be perfect. I just have to not quit.
I want to share this with you, Josh. It's it's the thing that I'm guiding my life with right now. And ever since I implemented it, life has just gotten magical. Mm-hmm. And I mean that in the sense of like dreams come true, best connection. Like, I'm having some of the most beautiful interactions with people. I'm just having like life suddenly, it seems like somebody finally lit everything up. And it's a real simple thing that I'm trying to practice. And I practice it with myself because I'm my best training partner, right? Nobody else is around as much as I am. When I need somebody to talk to, I'm always there. I'm my best friend. So I got the opportunity to practice this type of stuff with myself every single day, every opportunity that I get. And I try to show up and I try to see myself with, first and foremost, I want to make sure that I feel safe. And I do that with all sorts of different things, right? Nervous system regulation. Am I hungry? Am I tired? Taking care of my surroundings, all these kind of things to make sure that I feel safe. And then I want to make sure that I feel loved. So I'm just pouring love on me every opportunity that I can, right? Every time I have that ego pop up and criticize me, I counter it with love. I hear it because it's still there. Like you said earlier, it doesn't go anywhere.
Right.
They still hear it. I just don't listen to it anymore. And not only that, but I counter it. So rather than just letting that ego inside my head kind of take the microphone and control everything, it tries to take the microphone from me now. And I kind of like softly nudge it aside. Sometimes I punch the fucker in the face, but oftentimes it's kind of like softly nudging him aside to be like, I love you, Craig. I see you. I'm proud of you. And I believe in you. So between feeling safe, feeling loved, and being believed, like somebody believing in me, somebody else besides myself saying, I see you, I love you, and I believe in you. Just don't fucking quit and you'll make it. I think that's the thing that we all need. I don't think it's like I think it's a huge gift your friend gave you first and foremost, right?
Can I just say something about that?
Say it.
That exact thing, that's what I was trying to say. Is he gave me belief when
Mm,
nobody else was willing to give me that. He gave me that.
yeah.
And that's something that I have returned to him, that belief, in the same way now that he's fighting his journey, his cancer, and so when I returned that to him, it was this full circle moment. It was so emotional. It was, I wish you could have been there to see. It was like a belief of like there was a real fear in the way that I had a fear when I came to him, and so it was magical. Uh, it was such a the energy was so extreme. So I could it was overwhelming, the love that existed in that moment. And so thank you. That was what I was looking for.
Yeah. Breath, brother. We got to breathe.
We got to breathe.
Breath down into your belly, into your body.
Man, this is gonna be a two-parter, man.
Hell yeah.
We're gonna split this one up in multiple parts. I like
I
this.
love that.
But I do think that for I think I've run out of questions for now. I think that's what it is. This might be a good time. This might be a good time to maybe reflect on the stuff we've talked about and see what we can learn from it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think podcasts are a real gift. I know there's everybody and their dog has a podcast as time goes by, because we started podcasting back in 2016 where there weren't a lot of, I mean, obviously there were still thousands and thousands of podcasts, but it wasn't very well known. I used to have to explain it to everybody.
Mm.
They're like, what's a podcast? I'm like, it's kind of like an interview on a radio, but not really. And just fucking show up and we'll talk. And now that everybody has podcasts and
Yes.
podcasts are so well known and so integrated into our culture and so easily consumed, and we're having these type of conversations over and over and over again between people, and I gravitate towards these type of I mean the type of podcasts that I create are the type of podcasts that I gravitate towards. I don't just want to hear long conversations. I want to hear connected conversations. I want to hear people showing up and holding space with each other and opening up their hearts and sharing things. And I think what's happening through this beautiful medium of podcasting is it's giving everybody else an opportunity to sit in on this conversation with us. The entire time that we've been sitting here having this, I have felt like there is just this fucking group of dudes listening in, and just like the benefit I feel like, because I get in my head, here's my fear coming out. I always project my fear outwards onto the audience. I'll do this on Steph and Craig all the time because I get really anxious sometimes in the conversations and the things that we talk about. And then immediately I start thinking about the metaphorical audience that exists, right? These people that are on the other side of the camera and the microphone that I'm talking to. And when I think about them and the way that they see me, then I get nervous and my words start to stumble. And I've learned that that's just me projecting my fear outwards because I'm struggling to experience it internally within me. So then suddenly, rather than me owning the fact that I'm experiencing fear, then it becomes, well, the people that will be listening to this will be judging this and blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the truth of it is, I think this conversation that you and I have not only has had incredible waves and impact for me personally. I'm going to end this and get up and go pee and drink and do whatever else. Not drink, but like get a drink of water. And
Right.
it's going to change how I move forward in my day, Josh. And it's going to change how I move forward in my life. And I have 100% certainty that the people listening to it will have the same effect on them, because podcasting has changed my life.
Mm-hmm.
Not just through the art of creating it and sharing it with people, but I listen to podcasts a lot. And what it feels like is, whether I'm in the car, whether I've got them in my headphones and I'm doing yard work or mowing, doing dishes, whatever it might be, when I'm listening to it, it takes me to that space and time where they're having that conversation. And that's where I'm at. And it's not I mean, there's definitely times that I've used it as a way to detach from my reality and get through whatever I'm going through. But the majority of the time, I'm still present and connected and doing what I'm doing. But I'm also in this other beautiful place where 2 people or 3 people or 4 people are opening up their hearts and sharing each other. And somehow it is, I think, having a massive impact on the world. And I'm grateful to be a part of it. And I'm grateful to even just be in this moment right now with you. I think it's a really, really cool thing that you've created here and that Jake has created with you. And I'm really grateful that I got to be a part of it. And I'm hoping, and I actually not hope, I know it's an ongoing, continuing part of it because I'm not done talking to you.
No. That's never been the goal for me. I always like to, all my guests, it's always going to be a choice for them as well. And so if it feels right for them, that's important. But I do want to always extend that olive branch of like, I want to have a long-term relationship, ongoing relationship where we get to have conversations, check-ins every now and again. I don't know what the time frame looks like. I don't know when we would do it. I just know that I want to have that ongoing conversation of checking in, seeing how you're doing, seeing what life has offered you next time I
You know what
stop by.
podcasting has also done for me? Because part of what I was going to do when we got done with the podcast and we pushed
Right.
stop and now we're not
Yes.
recording the podcast anymore is I was
Sure.
going to make sure and give you my number. I want you to have my number and I
I would
want you
love
to
that.
know
Yeah.
that you can hit me up anytime. Like when I tell guys this, I don't mean like hit me up between the hours of 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, except on Wednesdays because I usually take lunch. Right? No, the idea behind it is when I pop into your head and you're like, God, I should call Craig. I should shoot him. I don't care what the inclination is. The offering is and the invitation is, please do it. And what podcasting has done, and because these type of conversations are so impactful, as I'm hoping and I know that people listening have felt and seen, you and I have shared this back and forth, right? And impacted one another. And you're walking away a different man. I'm walking away a different man in a beautiful way. And we get to go change the world around us by sharing this with people. That is what has really impacted me. So taking the concept and idea of like these type of conversations is what I want more of. It's why I've been podcasting since 2016. It's why I started Brave Men Dare. And what I'm doing now is instead of like thinking about my friends, I fucking call them up and I'm having like 2 hour long conversations with my buddies because we're getting into these type of conversations over the phone and we're busy. We're doing our shit. You know, we're driving around town. We're doing the same things that I would be doing if I was listening to a podcast. But instead of turning on a podcast, I just called a buddy that I feel inspired to call in that moment. It's not of like, who should I call today? Sometimes it's that, but oftentimes it's like, I want to talk to Steven. And so then when I get in the car and I'm running to the store, I call Steven. And it might be a 20-minute call. It might be sorry, dude, I'm busy. I can't talk right now. But more and more and more and more, I think it's a muscle that humans have to learn how to feel comfortable in, right? Connection is something that we struggle with a lot. But yeah, that's the invitation, man. I'm going to invite you when we're done. I'm doing it on air right now on the podcast, but do that with your friends. Do that with the people that you feel pulled to. And yeah, it's hard and it's awkward and it's vulnerable. Over the holidays, I was sending out I reached out to a bunch of men that I just felt close to.
Mm.
And I was like, some of them live over in the UK. Like I don't, Ben is here. I've got a other handful of physically accessible men around me that I can connect with, but I don't let that stop me. So reach out to those men, reach out to those people, and don't just think of it like, oh, let's find time to talk or let's schedule a date to get a drink. When they pop into your fucking head, call them. Just call them. And even if they blow you off the first 5 times, don't think of it like you've done anything wrong. Think of it like you're showing up to share this type of connection. And I think that alone, I think will do like it's changing me. Like I said, it's changing me for the better.
First of all, I have to reply to that the olive branch you've extended. I'm really grateful that you have, and I have felt it's funny. I have that little intuition of like, I think I should keep talking to him like longer term. And that was one of the things where so you kind of beat me to it, but I gladly accept that. And once we get done here and I hit stop, I'll take down your phone number and I'll give you mine. And
Yes, and I don't extend my phone number to everybody because I definitely acknowledge and recognize, like I've had to learn over the years the importance of my own personal boundaries and spaces for my time, my energy, my focus, where I'm choosing to spend and extend it. But the offering is available to everybody to reach out to me personally. You can go to our website. You can, I mean, all of that stuff that is stuff that people talk about and do. Like if this has impacted people and they want to talk to Craig, don't think, well, I can't talk to Craig. You can fucking talk to Craig. Hit me up. But like we respond to almost all of our DMs unless they are, the spam DMs. We respond to
can
all of our
I
DMs, all of our emails.
can I just, for the people watching that do want to do that, what's the best way to reach you? Where do you recommend going?
The easiest way, if you're like, oh my God, this episode changed me and I want to talk to you right now, DM me. Just go to our whatever platform you're on. We're on all of them except for X. So we do TikTok, Insta, Facebook, and YouTube. Both Steph and Craig's show is there, as well as Brave Men Dare. So that's the easiest way. StephandCraig.co is our website for the podcast. It's not .com, because I don't know who the fuck's botting that, right? We keep waiting for it to come up, but
Right.
Somebody out there's got the .com.
It's hard to get the .com.
Yeah, it's StephandCraig.co, and then Brave Men Dare. We do have the URL. We just haven't thrown up the website yet, but again, just through social media is the easiest way.
I did, before I let you go, I asked you these questions last time, but just because nobody got to hear it, I would like to ask you just a few questions that I ask my guests. You've already answered one, which is where we can find you. But the second is, have you discovered purpose? And if you know what it is, what do you think it is? And if it's not, what do you think it might be?
I am 100% certain what my purpose is. It's not something that I question or doubt anymore. It's something that I looked for a really long time. And in some ways, I feel like it's the thing that has been driving me all along. This need for purpose, this need for understanding of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Why do I get up? What's the catalyst? What's the purpose? All of these kind of things, right? And my understanding at this point on my journey where I'm at, the purpose of my life is to love every single person that I come into contact with the exact same way that I'm currently loving that 5-year-old version of myself. And the more that I open up to love and the more that I let love in, the better my life gets. And I don't mean that from a conceited place of like, by the way, like I just had a conversation with Stephanie this morning where we financially don't have enough money coming in. So we're scrambling to come up with, the asinine things of like, we got to come up with a $57 fucking water bill by the 13th or something, right?
Right.
Of trying to figure out how to pay bills when you're trying to pay bills. That's exactly where I'm at on one level. And then on the other level, I am the richest motherfucker you've ever met because I am swimming in love every single day.
That's real wealth.
I give it, I receive it, I look for it, I search for it. I had awareness the other day. I couldn't figure out money because I've got so many problems with money and money issues and money this, and I can't figure out money. What's my problem with money? I got to get over this money block so that I can start receiving money. Big story for me around money, right? And I had the thought the other day, and ever since I've had the thought, it's changed everything, at least in relationship to money. I just replaced money with love. So every time I hear money now, I think love. I'm like, how much is that going to cost? Well, that's 15 loves.
That's interesting.
Well, what my best example or the thing that I like the most, and I've been asking people this is, what would you, because everybody gets this question asked, like, what would you do if money wasn't an issue? And I think, what would you do if you had all the love in the world? What would you do with it? Right? You'd want to share it. Hey, I got all the love. Right? I'd want to share all of that. And it's endless too. I'm infinitely wealthy. I've got the bank that I am withdrawing love from has no bounds. So I can give as much as I want And I can also go and grab a bunch for me. So I can take $15 of love and throw it in my pocket, and I can give you $15 of love. And I can give Jake $15 and fuck 15. I can give you 15 grand. I can give you three, like, you know what I mean? There's no
Right.
limit. So when I shifted and stopped looking at it from money, and I like, trust me, I'm not sitting here thinking like, well, it's just changed your concept of love and your life's going to change. I'm still bringing along with me all of that programming, all of that story, all of that negativity, all of that ego. That didn't magically disappear and go away. And I thought that it would. That was the story that I had throughout my entire life, was like, once I made it, once I figured it out, once I got to the point, once I put the pieces together, I'd eventually arrive upon my life, and then it would be easy. And me shifting up the perspective of changing money to love and the way that I look at it didn't change my relationship to money. Like I said, my wife and I had this conversation this morning where we got to figure out something for January, but I'm not thinking about it from the context of survival or safety or how I'm going to pay bills or maybe the lights will get turned off. I'm just like, oh yeah, we got to send the power company 57 pieces of love. So there's a whole infrastructure with the power company, and they got to keep the lights on there, and they got to pay the people that are taking this payment, and they got to get the guys out there on the line. Like, I am sending my love everywhere. I have the opportunity to share so much love with the world around me. It's the exchange of goods when I go to the grocery store on one level, and then it's also this. And this is what it's really about, I think, this opportunity to connect heart to heart in this way and open up and connect and fill with each other. So yeah, just start thinking about money as love, and next thing you know, you'll be super fucking wealthy.
If you could speak to your childhood self, what would you say?
Like, do you want a simplified answer? You want a couple
I
of
want,
words?
I want whatever answer feels true.
I don't speak to my inner self, my inner child. I carry him with me everywhere. So I don't have to think about what I would say to him. He's with me.
Mm.
He sits on my lap. He rides on my shoulders. He bounces around this room because he's fucking bored right now. As we're sitting here talking, he's over there playing with the shit over there in the corner, the rocks and the stones. I carry that part of me everywhere I go now. And he's the thing that I think of first. And when I look at how I move through life, I don't do anything that is going to hurt him. I don't choose to put myself in situations where he's at risk. I don't let other people hurt him. So I'm very conscious about the people that I let around me, because in doing so, they're going to get to meet that part of me. They're going to get to hang out with 5-year-old Craig. And I want to make sure that they're safe. So I've prioritized his safety. And it's not like I've taken my autonomy and safety and placed it out on this child. It's just the awareness of he will never have to go without. And the thing that he will never have to go without is those things that we were talking about earlier. He will never have to go without safety. He will never have to go without love. And he will never not be believed. He will always be believed, loved, and safe.
That's beautiful. Craig, this isn't the last conversation we're going to have. I have to have further conversations with you. I can't thank you enough for being on here and taking time and being in this space with me, and going through the roller coaster that we've gone through of emotions and
It's wave riding, dude. That's
and
life.
memories. Yeah, it's
I feel like we were out in the ocean catching waves. Every now and then we're chilling on the boards. We're looking around. We're like, fuck, man, it's crazy out surfing, and seagulls will go fly by. And the next thing we know, like, Josh, I think this one's yours. Start paddling.
Yeah.
That wave's coming. Oh, and then you caught it and you rode that wave, and I cheered you on. And then you're like, oh, brother,
Here's
another
yours.
one's coming for you. Oh shit, here comes emotion. I got to catch this one. It's just felt like you and me hanging out in the ocean today, brother. I've loved it.
I am very grateful for it and for your time. And we'll talk again soon. But let me just hit this record thing and see if I can't pause it. There we go. Stop recording.
I had just a moment where I thought you said, let me hit this record thing. And I'm like,
no,
cool.
no. Stop recording is what I need to hit.